And the Hagmann Report for today. It is a manic Monday. It is Monday, the 8th day of December 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my son, my co-host, fellow investigator Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear an incredible program tonight. 3 hours of news, information, analysis. Very special sort of news, actually. This news tonight brought to you courtesy of L.A. Marzulli. That is our special guest tonight, L.A. Marzulli, on the trail of the Nephilim. And I got to tell you, what a fantastic book he has written. And I'm just so excited to talk with, well, both Joe and I are excited to talk with L.A. Before we get our show rolling, let me just make this announcement that portions of this broadcast are, in fact, sponsored by NatureBox. Folks, you know NatureBox. You know it. We talk about it all the time. NatureBox ships great tasting, healthy snacks right to your door, and you can forget the vending machine and the snack aisles at the 7-Eleven and start snacking a lot smarter with healthy, delicious treats such as the cranberry medley. Yo, boy, if you like cranberries, it's like a flavor explosion in your mouth, as well as others. You can support this broadcast by ordering a free NatureBox sampler box at naturebox.com/CFP-radio. That's right, free, as in free snacks, free NatureBox snacks found at naturebox.com/CFP-radio, or go to our website, scroll down to the footer, and click on the NatureBox logo there, and it'll take you to our nice little world there with NatureBox. I want to thank you for all who have ordered and who have said, hey, this stuff's really great. Now, having said that, folks, we broadcast for the new listeners, and thanks for sending us emails during the week, during the weekend. Everyone from Taiwan to Topeka to Saskatchewan, just thank you so much for tuning in to our show. I will be responding to each and every email, I hope, here over the next 48 to 72 hours. That said, Joe, welcome to the studio. Oh, by the way, our home base on the internet is hagmanandhagmann.com, hagmanandhagmann.com. Be sure to bookmark it. Visit there often. A lot of content will be going up tonight into tomorrow. Joe, welcome to the studio this evening.
Great to be here. We have a fantastic show lined up for tonight with our guest, Mr. L.A. Marzulli. He is an author, radio show host, speaker, prophecy and archaeological extraordinaire, and he's been a guest in the past. We've had the pleasure of meeting him in Orlando at the Prophecy and the News Conference, and he is always on the trail of the Nephilim, if we'll say
him and his wife are great people, and I got to tell you, we have our own studio copy of On the Trail of Nephilim. It's a book like no other. It's let me just double check here. It's a great read. It's about 260 plus pages, and it's on very high gloss, nice glossy paper. And I've got to tell you, the information that's in this book, he'll be looking at things a whole lot differently from now on. Plus, the 2015 calendar. Oh, we'll have L.A. talk about that. But welcome, folks. Mr. Marzulli, welcome to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report today.
Hey, guys. Always a pleasure to be here and an honor. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
It's our honor, I'll tell you. We really appreciate you coming on. Where do you want to start? Because there's so much, and even in the introduction of your book, I almost feel like I could read this to the audience and they would be, entranced by the information. But where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. Basically, this is Volume 2, On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 2, and we're actually working on Volume 3. We've just, no pun intended, sort of uncovered what has been kept from the public and hidden, in my opinion, for years, for decades, maybe even for the last century. And this stuff is starting to, these artifacts are coming to light. And it seems, and look, I'm not the only author who's doing this. I mean, there's other people with different worldviews other than the biblical worldview that are looking at some of this information. And the bottom line is it seems like there's another history that the American people, for one, and the people of the world have not been told the truth. For instance, just to completely off topic here, you look at the Sphinx in Egypt and the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. Zawi Hawass, with all due respect to Mr. Hawass, basically says, the Egyptians built the pyramid. Hey, not so fast. Enter my friend who's no longer with us, Patty Heron, but Patty Heron's groundbreaking book, The Nephilim and the Pyramid of Apocalypse, posited that the Nephilim built the Great Pyramid. And when we were in Peru, and we stood in front of Sacsayhuaman, 12,000 feet above sea level, looking at huge megalithic stones with polygonal sides fit together absolutely perfectly. And, for the skeptic, no amount of evidence will ever suffice. There's always, 20 reasons why there's no supernatural component to it. That's fine. I really don't care. Believe what you want to believe. The evidence seems to be pointing that there is an outside agency that has technology, which, by the way, was not left here, that has technology that is far superior to what we have in modernity, one, and the same outside agency is also extremely interested in the human genome. And the ancient alien crowd will go right along with me with that last statement. They'll say, yeah, absolutely. Where we part company is when I point back to, gee, guys, this solidifies and validates, in my opinion, the biblical narrative. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to validate with hardcore physical scientific evidence the fact that the Nephilim were on the earth in the days of Noah and also afterward when the sons of God went into the daughters of men. And remember, Moses is writing that particular scripture hundreds and hundreds of years after the effect. It's being dictated to him on Sinai by the Most High God. And he's writing this hundreds of years after the flood. Why wouldn't he just write the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, period? If there's only one incursion, there's a period there and it's over. It's done. Okay, it's over. But no, he says, and they were on the earth when, and he says very specifically, they were on the earth and also afterwards when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had children by them. And that point, that one little scripture is such a hot button item. And many good people look at that and say there's only one incursion. I look at that and say, guys, it seems to be pretty straight ahead that Moses is writing hundreds of years after the fact. Why wouldn't he just write the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, pointing back to the days of Noah, period, end of story? Why would he say, and also afterwards? And then when we get into Numbers 13 and other places, even in the Genesis account, we see that the Nephilim are running all over the place. So, in my opinion, there's a second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever incursions. There's a constant manipulation of the genome. And, of course, this brings us into our Watchers series, Watchers 8, with when we took out the implant from Bill. And that was just phenomenal. We talked about that the last time I was on the show.
Yeah, we did.
Absolutely high strangeness. And the two, in my opinion, coalesce. They are definitely connected. And do we have all the answers yet? No, we don't. But that's why we're on the trail. And it seems that all the evidence so far is pointing to our hypothesis that the Nephilim tribes fled the Promised Land, or were commonly known as the Levant, when Joshua and Caleb pressed into the Promised Land and began to conquer the Nephilim tribes. And we see evidence of this all through the Americas, and these cultures pop up right around the time of what we believe is the diaspora, or the conquest of Canaan, about 3,500 years ago. 3,500 years ago to 3,000 years ago, that's when these cultures emerge, and they come from nowhere. For instance, the Paragas culture, talked about that in On the Trail of the Nephilim 1 and 2. Where do these people come from? Why the elongated skulls? And we have something very, very interesting, which my friend and colleague Brian Forrester was able to find for us, which, of course, we included in On the Trail 2. A lot of controversy. Skeptics are stamping their feet, thunderously and saying it. All these skulls are cradle headboarded, blah, blah, blah. Not so fast, my friends, not so fast. And this is probably a good place to actually enter into the book. But Brian Forrester and another man from Russia discovered this book, a journal by these two archaeologists, amateur archaeologists, 1842, who were in Peru, okay? And they wrote extensively about their travels in Peru. And they were unearthing many mummies. Now, this is 160 years ago, basically, even older than that, right? There's no photography, and so either they were doing the hand drawings or they would take with them a professional artist to do the hand drawings. But going back to 1842, in academic circles, the controversy is raging even then. Oh, it's all cradle headboarding, and people are going, no, it's not. Some of it's genetic, and this is carried over to modernity, to the present day. This is what they discovered, and listen to this quote. It's in the book. We ourselves, this is from 1842, a journal, we ourselves have observed the same fact in many mummies of children of tender age, who, although they had cloths about them, were yet without any vestige or appearance of pressure of the cranium. More still, the same formation of the head, the elongated skull, presents itself in children yet unborn. And of this truth we have had convincing proof in the sight of a fetus enclosed in the womb of a mummy of a pregnant woman, which we found in a cave 2 leagues from Tarma, in which is, at this moment, in our collection. So there's an artist rendering of the fetus that they took from the womb with an elongated skull. It also has teeth. So we have 2 major anomalies. You can't elongate a skull inside of a pregnant woman. That's not going to happen. And normally, babies are born without teeth. So we have some serious considerations here. And, of course, look, guys, it's not conclusive yet. The DNA evidence that we hope to bring out, or the samples that we hope to bring out soon to do the DNA testing on, will at least point in the direction that, and again, going back to our hypothesis, that there is an outside agency manipulating the genome. And, of course, we believe that outside agency are the fallen angelic hosts of the heavenly realm. And when we say that, people have such preconceived notions about when you say fallen angel. What does that mean? They think of some guy in a red suit with a pitchfork. We're looking at incredibly powerful, intelligent, brilliant, and yet completely in a fixed state of rebellion and crazy and evil entities, which we believe, and the Bible backs this up, have been interfacing with the human race literally for millennia. So that's what the book sort of touches on.
If I can chime, I'm sorry, if I can chime in here. When you were talking about the cranial deformations and the there's in your book, and again, folks, we're talking with L.A. Marzulli on the Trail of the Nephilim 2, new archaeological research, which has just a ton of information in it. Folks, go to HagmannHagmann.com. On the right-hand side, you'll see two skulls, one elongated, another normal. Click on the link above that. It'll take you directly to the book website, which is on lamarzulli.net or LA's website. You've got both linked up there with HagmannHagmann.com. But LA, let me ask you this. Chapter 17 of your book, page 187, talks about the Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 27 through 28, cranial deformations with God, essentially saying, "You shall not round the corners of your heads." And I'm not going to read the whole verse, but obviously there's some biblical, as you just noted here in this interview, there's biblical relationships to your work and to what's going on, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. In the Levitical chapter, and this is by Corey Huffman, who accompanied us on the Nephilim Skull tour with Brian Forrester in May of 2014. And Corey saw everything firsthand and handled the artifacts. And as he pondered it and sort of decompressed, because there's so much information coming at you when you're down there, it takes a good several weeks, perhaps even longer sometimes, just to decompress and think about everything that was seen. And Corey was drawn to Leviticus, where it talks about that this chapter, or that particular verse that you mentioned, may actually, it's not talking about hair. It seems to be talking about deformation, cranial deformation, which is really interesting. And that's included in the book. And it's sort of, once again, as we're uncovering some of this information, I found Corey Hoffman's paper that he wrote very interesting, and that's why we included it in the book.
Gotcha. Now that I took you off topic and off your path, I'm satisfied. No, I'm just kidding. I just found it very interesting. That kind of, when I saw that, for some reason, and as you were talking, it just reminded me of when I read that in your book. In terms of, it just didn't seem to fit, at least not the common narratives. For example, the King James version of the Bible, with respect to any of the versions, but it seems so out of place. And as I dug deeper into that, Corey's paper and your collective research seems to back up, obviously, everything. Your research in the book. But let me ask you: we've got we got a lot of new listeners here, and I got a couple of emails here. L.A., I hate to ask you to do this, but let me ask you this again. If for the new listeners who are unfamiliar with the Nephilim, can you give us just a paragraph of what the Nephilim are and where they come from, based on your research?
Yeah, I would absolutely, and I'd be honored to do that. To 6 account. Actually, before that, let's go back to the Genesis 3 account, where it says that your seed and her seed, in other words, the fallen angel's seed and the seed of the woman, will be at enmity with each other, which sets up the cosmic chess match, which sets up a seed war between the fallen angelic hosts of heaven and the seed of men, seed of the woman. Mankind. And later on, in Genesis 6, we discover that the sons of God, see the daughters of men, desire whomever they want, choose whoever they want as wives. They have sex with these women, and the Nephilim, this hybrid being known as the Nephilim, are then the progeny, the result of that unholy union, if you will, between the seed of the serpent, or the fallen angels, and the women of earth. And this leads to the flood. And I want to address something here with all due respect to, it's interesting how the narrative, the biblical narrative, is, in my opinion, a vetting process in Genesis, where it talks about Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. That's a vetting process. And the fact that I believe that everyone that went on that ark was pure. There was no Nephilim blood. No one snuck on. Otherwise, it's sort of an insult to the Most High God to think that he'd wipe out the entire earth and have someone on the ark who was contaminated with Nephilim. That also would mean that, he's destroying the entire planet, and then he's allowing someone on the ark that's Nephilim. I just don't buy that. And, of course, there's people that hang on to that because they insist that there's only one incursion. But biblically, it doesn't say that. It says the Nephilim were on the earth and also afterwards. And this is what is so controversial about that passage. And also afterwards means and also afterwards. You can try to torture the text any way you want, but that's what it means. It means and also afterwards. And Moses is writing this, 1,000 years plus after the flood. Yep. Why would he state that? And see, it's important to understand, because Jesus himself tells us it'll be like the days of Noah when I return, which begs the question: what differentiates the days of Noah is the presence of the fallen angels mating with the women. And you say, well, L.A., is that going on now? And the short answer to that is yeah. I've got an artifact in my possession in a safe location, and I'll just briefly tell you the story. A woman who has been a contactee and has had missing time and been an experiencer pretty much all her life, and a man who was abducted and taken for 5 days, and I'm not mentioning any names here, had a child. She found herself, she was pregnant. And in the classic sense of what our studies has been, in the first trimester of the pregnancy, she was taken and the baby was taken from her. But the placenta was good size, and we are investigating the artifact, the placenta, first of all, to see if there are any burn marks, surgical marks that might be there that would indicate that something was taken. And then, of course, we'll do preliminary DNA testing to see what we're looking at also. The phenomenon is real. Something's going on. ET is extremely interested in the genome.
And I like how you do connect the current events, the the DNA, the blood, the genome, all of that with your research, and you can't do it otherwise. So it's all interrelated, interconnected. But let me ask you, going back to the Ark account, the narrative of the Ark. One thing, L.A., and let me ask you this directly, because one thing I was thinking about. If during the time of Noah, and Noah, of course, gathered the animals in pairs, male and female, presumably. Okay, what would cause God to wipe out the animal kingdom when, of course, the animals were not, unless the animals were in fact involved in some sort of process, shall we say?
Well, this is the work of Tom Horn, Chris Putman, and others who have certainly addressed this. The idea of transhumanism, the idea of chimeras, and it ties back into Greek mythology, Greek mythos, with centaurs and minotaurs. Is that just a nice little story, or are we looking at some reality? Is it actually based in reality? And I think it's based in reality. I think that look, the Book of Enoch, which I understand, I get it. And I get flack from this, but the bottom line is the Book of Enoch is quoted 70 times in the Tanakh. It's quoted in our New Testament. It's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's referred to by the rabbis. We can at least appreciate its historicity. That's all. I'm not calling it canon. But the Book of Enoch states that the fallen angels not only sinned with the woman, but they sinned with the animal kingdom. And remember, this is not a weekend frat party. People need to understand what we're looking at. It's at least 450 years that they're here. That's a long, long time. Interestingly enough, a researcher, and forgive me, I can't remember his name, he sent me an email, and he had one of those epiphanies, which I'll share with you tonight, which ties right into our work. We know that after the flood, we had the Tower of Babel. And this is what it says when you read the account, and I'm going to go back and check it too. He said, they did not build, and the Bible is very specific about this, they did not build with stone, but with brick. It says that. They used brick, not stone. And does that refer to the ancient megalithic structures that we see? And get this, Hagmann and Hagmann, after the flood, were the gateways and portals closed? I think they were.
Wow.
And they were slowly opened up. That's the whole purpose of Babel. The gates are opened back up, and there's a few sneaking in, but the whole thing starts over again very quickly. And Noah, by the way, is still alive during this.
Very interesting.
It's built with brick, not stone. Yeah, it really is. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. The wording, of course, brick, not stone. Think of the implications behind that, folks.
Yeah, think of the implications. Yeah, exactly. So,
okay, fantastic. We really appreciate, and I just got a couple of, one thank you note from a new listener. Thank you for clearing that up. L.A., so go ahead. I mean, this is, to me anyway, having a copy of your initial book, and of course having a copy now of On the Trail of the Nephilim 2, this reads to me like, folks, the best way for me to describe it would be like an investigative report with a compilation of witness statements and narratives and photographic evidence and other documentation.
If I can jump in also, we see there are new TV shows, The Searching for the Giants in L.A. Did you say that you were going to be on the History Channel?
Guys, I consented to the interview. I'm excited about it. I have no idea what they did with the editing. We'll find out tomorrow night. I know this, that I will not have to defend myself. I know that if they twist it in any way, there's going to be a flurry of emails to the History Channel. I know that. I've already had people going, I know you're going to be on. I hope they didn't screw around with you. So we'll see what happens. But, it seems like I'm trusting the process. What's interesting is and you'll see this tomorrow night, but that photograph that I discovered in the Catalina Museum with Rob Glidden circa 1919, when he's employed by the High Museum to unearth and these photographs, and that's just an amazing photograph. No one analyzed it till I got there. No one said anything about that photograph till I put it on the map. And I told Vieira's about it, and they went out. They flew to Catalina just for that photograph, and that's what they interviewed me for, because it's my discovery, my intellectual property, and they're giving me the credit for it tomorrow night on the show, which is great. But I was the one that did the due diligence and had the photograph analyzed. First of all, it's not Photoshop. Second of all, we believe it's the real deal. It's not some creation that Glidden staged. It's interesting, guys, that no one, as far as I know, has said anything about Glidden staging anything until after I did the evidence or the analysis. It was a triple-blind study that we did. And all of a sudden, when I went public with it, the photograph was staged, L.A. And some blogger, and I won't mention the guy's name, writes on his on his blog, it was staged. Well, with all due respect, sir, how can you possibly say that? How do you possibly know? What evidence can you bring forth? Just show me something. Of course, you can't. There is no evidence. There's nothing except the fact that you say it's staged because that's convenient to support your worldview and your paradigm. What if it's not staged? And we've had people analyze the photograph. And look, Glidden at this particular time is young, and he's working for the High Museum. Later on, it gets Barnum and Bailey. I get it. Believe me, I get it. But in 1919, and that's what the back of that photograph says, San Miguel Island, 1919, Glidden is in the employment of the High Museum. He's not staging or creating anything, And if it was staged, then why didn't someone say so before I made a big deal out of it? Why didn't someone say, these photographs are staged? It was only after I put forth in the book and I started blogging about it that the skeptics, the photograph staged. Well, why? Because you say so? I mean, it's incredibly arrogant to me that these people sit perhaps in their mother's basement, and have nothing else better to do except take pot shots at the research. I was out there. I handled the photograph. We've had it analyzed with a triple-blind study. That photograph shows a skeleton about 9 feet tall. And there's no hanky-panky with the photograph. That was analyzed.
I'm looking at the copy of the photograph in L.A. I cannot imagine, and you make a number of good points here. Look, we're investigators, and I've been an investigator for almost 30 years, 28 plus years. Motive, means, in terms of, it doesn't make any sense. For anybody to Photoshop or no, it's not staged. I mean, I could tell you right now, just based on the totality of evidence, and folks, we're talking about LA's book on the trail of Nephilim 2, New Archaeological Research. Please go to hagmannhagmann.com, click on the link. And by the way, LA has been kind enough to put up a number of images there and also information about and from his book. But bottom line here, you make a very compelling case. If we took your book to a grand jury, I mean, certainly the giants, Nephilim, I shouldn't say giant, the Nephilim would be indicted, okay, or there would be certainly a case made to support your research. Joe, I cut you off. I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
A couple of things I want to comment on what L.A. said. First, when you talk about the people sitting in the mother's basement, coming up with ways to interfere, we have to come to the realization that there are thousands upon thousands of people per subject that get paid to put this information out there. I mean, this is their job, So it's gone beyond, for the sake of just, starting trouble. It's now an employment opportunity. And second of all, we see in the Bible, it states there were giants in those days, and the Bible is the true Word of God. And what you are doing is not trying to create any kind of new or alternative theory. You're trying to back up what the Bible says through scientific research, and I believe you have done so. But at the same time, I'm going to ask a question here. We see that you mentioned the ancient alien astronaut theorist guys, those shows, and all these different theories that we see coming out now, how much of the actual evidence of these findings will be used to support those theories, and how much do you think people will buy into them?
Well, what's interesting is we came out with Watcher 6 in 2013. With all due respect to the History Channel and Giorgio Tsoukalos, whom I've never met, he seems like a really nice guy. That was Watcher 6. What we discovered, thanks to Brian Forrester, I saw a YouTube video, I emailed him, we started a chat, and next thing you know, we came down with an expedition. Senior Juan Navarro, in fact, I dedicated On the Trail 1 to Brian and On the Trail 2 to Senior Juan Navarro, the curator of the Paracas History Museum. He allowed us to touch the skulls, examine the skulls, weigh the skulls, look at the skulls, photograph the skulls. It was amazing. And all of a sudden, fast forward a year later, there's Giorgio in Senior Juan's museum. Well, I mean, come on. I mean, we were the ones that put that on the map. We did. We were the ones with Watcher 6 that put that on the map. And it's interesting that they'll spin it when they're down there, and they'll say, this may be proof of the ancient astronaut theory. Ancient astronaut theorists believe that these elongated skulls may have something to do, and they're right. In the classic sense, a fallen angel is an extraterrestrial. I get it. You see, I mean, we are so close, guys. We really are. We're so close. We both agree that there's something going on here. We know that. We differ as to the final conclusion. And the moment I say fallen angels, they go, whoa. They can't get their head around it because they're thinking religion and church and all this other stuff, which has really obfuscated the clarity of the biblical record. The biblical record is really clear what's going on here. But the church, which is with all due respect, and I'm part of that church, but is an invention of mankind. And what I'm talking about is cathedrals and stained glass windows and robes and priests, investments and confessionals and parades and this and that and all this other crazy stuff. Has nothing to do with anything. It's all man-made gobbledygook. Go back and read the book of Acts. They gathered in people's homes and they waited on the Spirit of a living God. And guess what? People were born again in the Spirit of a living God, and that was the meeting. That was the meeting. They talked about the good news, and people heard that you could have eternal life by believing that He who came, which of course was Yeshua, and by His sacrifice on Calvary, and by that blood sacrifice, and by asking for forgiveness of our sins, the Holy Spirit would come into us. We'd have eternal life. That's what set the world on fire, not cathedrals and priests and all this other crazy nonsense and crusades. All that's crazy stuff. But then go back to the book of Acts and read it, and that's all in the biblical narrative. And so we're so close. We really are. We both realize, the ancient astronaut theorists realize that something's going on here and we're not being told the truth. The Christians, the people who believe in the Nephilim, like myself, Tom Horn, Gary Stearman, my late mentor, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, G.H. Pember, the same guy, Chuck Missler, who I just received the gold medallion from, thanks to Koinonia House, all believe in multiple incursions. All of us believe that the Nephilim were here, that it may, in fact, be the key to end-time prophecy. And this is what's at stake. Who is going to dominate the narrative? Who's going to the conversation? Who is going to steer the conversation? Right now, the History Channel, the Ancient Astronaut crowd, the exopolitic crowd, MUFON, the UFO guys, they're steering the conversation. And we're in the back seat. We have limited resources. But you know what? We serve a God that loves to do this. And at some point in time, when He gets ready, the tables will turn. Maybe He'll send in an L.A. Marzulli or a Hagmann Hagmann. Who knows who He'll send in. But He'll send somebody in there, and He'll get the message across. And everybody will go, whoa, look at this. And maybe that happens when and if we can get the DNA evidence out of Peru. We'll see.
It's interesting how you just frame that whole, do I say argument or debate or position, because, this is a critical, I believe anyway, it's critical for us to understand intellectually the Nephilim and the accounts of the Old Testament and what's going on today, as a matter of fact, especially with the manipulation of the DNA And of course, it's all about the DNA. It's all about the blood. It's a numbers game, demographically. And people need to understand. I think people need to understand that we're facing, we're facing this DNA manipulation demographically. If people look at it objectively, and through the lens of just numbers alone, demographics alone, I think people would be better off. I mean, maybe I slaughtered that argument, but and by the way, you do. I like the way that you put the information, you present the information out there for people to look at, understand, and you really and you say, here it is. Essentially make up your own mind to the extent.
Make up your own mind. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that really tells a lot about your research, because if your research can stand alone without you having to hold someone's hand through down the path to a conclusion, certainly the conclusion that I get after reading your book and looking at your series is the fact that, look, this whole thing, it's going on right now. It's critical. We need to understand. And, folks, we do need to understand intellectually, because the intellectual aspect of this does really bolster the faith aspect, I believe. And understanding what went on then, understanding what's going on right now, we need to understand it. Go ahead, Ellie.
I agree. I totally agree with you, and I like the conclusion that you brought up. I mean, it's the key. I think it's the key to end-time prophecy, and really understanding what's about to take place on this planet, and understand what has happened in the past and how it links inexorably with what's going on in modernity, what's happening in real time right now.
Yeah, before I forget, let me go back to tomorrow night, the History Channel. Episode title, L.A., time that this will be on?
Right. I'm not sure what the episode title is. Do you have it there?
I was looking for it earlier, and I could not find it, so no, I don't.
I can't find it either. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, we'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, this will be good, folks. Watch tomorrow, or at least set your DVRs to record the History Channel tomorrow night, featuring L.A. Marzulli on the trail of the Nephilim, and this is going to be good, and I can't wait to see. Like you, look, I've been on TV. I understand, that they might film for 10 hours and use 10 minutes of that 10-hour footage.
Yeah.
So, and they could end up twisting your words and just so it's really a kind of a crapshoot. Pardon the expression. When you do interviews like that, you've got to put a lot of faith in the editor, and you had no editorial control. In other words, they didn't come to you with the final product and say, yeah, that's their SOP. I got it. All right. So here we are, and let me compliment you as well. The number of color and black and white, the clarity of the photographs in the book as well. I'm very hard pressed to really when I looked through it and Joe looked through it. We were talking about it, your new book. The photographs that you have, the totality of evidence that you present, I cannot imagine anyone, even if someone did, for example, or is making accusations of photoshopping of a particular photograph. There's enough anecdotal. Well, I shouldn't say anecdotal. There's enough supportive evidence beyond that to support the existence of Nephilim. Why do you think you hit a nerve for this particular photo?
Well, I think a couple of things. There's a bunch of people that refuse to believe in anything supernatural. There is no supernatural. The Darwinists, of course, cling to that tenaciously. There is no supernatural. There is no God of the Bible. That's it. That's their worldview. That's their paradigm. All of this just happened by chance over billions of years, and that's it. The God of the Bible is just a bunch of fantasy. People were smoking something and wandering around in the desert, and for all we know, it might have been like some sort of an extraterrestrial that they were. In fact, the History Channel even runs with that. The Manna Machine. You remember that one on the Ancient Alien show in the first season? The Manna Machine. Are you kidding me? Made by extraterrestrials, and E.T. is responsible for the resurrection and all this other stuff, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And there is no supernatural. The late Dr. Stan Monteith would talk about this when I was on his show. There is a supernatural, and in some ways it's more real than the natural world around us. I believe that we're sort of like in a matrix in a way, and we don't understand really where we are and what's going on here. But we are in the midst of a cosmic battle, a cosmic war, and we know that from the prophecies in the Bible, which are 100% true, with great specificity, calling out way in our priority, calling out our priority ahead of time, the end from the beginning and the beginning from the end, and stating with incredible clarity that like a 13-year-old can read the certain scriptures and go, yeah, I understand what that's talking about. And we see these scriptures fulfilled in the coming of Yeshua, in Jesus, again, with great specificity. We see the rebirth of Israel. We see the warnings of Jesus telling us wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. And that's up for each person to heed that warning that Jesus tells us and see if it's applicable to the present day. And, of course, in my opinion, it is very applicable to what's happening. Just click on the news, go on the Drudge Report or any site that you want, and that's what we're looking at. The whole planet is just seething right now. It's wacky. It's more wacky than I've ever seen it since I've been alive. The 64 years that I've been wandering around on this little ball of dirt, God knows where it is, but circling around the sun. But it's not going away. It's getting more complex to where people realize we can't fix this. We're not going to fix this. Well, I'm not just going to join hands and sing Kumbaya. And I believe, speaking of the prophetic, that the Psalm 83 war, my friend and colleague Bill Salas talks about this groundbreaking book. He got a lot of flack when he came out with Israelistine, but that's precisely what we're seeing. Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south in Gaza, ISIL running around in Iraq, taking great swaths of that. And, of course, you've got the Iranians that want the bomb and want to destroy the Jewish plague. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So at some point in time, and Israel showed its muscle over the weekend when it hit Damascus.
Yes, it did.
It's got to cut the head off the snakes. Got to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, by the way, having this bird's eye view, folks, of people like L.A. Marzulli and others who all come to the table with their portion, their entree or their part of the meal. And when you look at Israelistine, for example, and the talk of the Psalm 83 war and LA's work with respect to the Nephilim, and all of this, it really is starting to fit nicely together. And I think that, LA, just to be frank here, I think that as the people such as yourself come together, come to the table, come to the courtroom of public opinion with the evidence, I think that the other side is getting a little bit concerned, and that therefore they're going to use some dirty tricks and some tactics frowned upon in the courtroom, so to speak, at least a venue I'm familiar with, that will actually attempt to convince the jury, that's everyone listening, as every member of the planet, that they're correct, not you, or you're correct. So I think the closer we get to this final answer, or this putting together the puzzle pieces, the greater the attacks will be, and the greater the attacks are. And we're seeing.
Yeah, I completely concur with that. Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening. If you want to write a book like a Nephilim trilogy, which is a fictional work, and have a storyline and a plot, you're not rattling any cages. And that's nice, little pat on the head, nice novel, thank you so much. Not rattling any cages. But the moment we begin to show real evidence, and uncover this stuff, no pun intended, we're rattling cages, and I know that. People are starting to, get upset, and it's what cracks me up is a lot of these naysayers never go anywhere. They never take the photograph and you get the photograph analyzed. They don't spend the time and money to go down to Peru and you go look at the skulls and see that there's only one parietal plate, and that one of the skulls down there has 30% more cranial capacity, well outside the human range, and on and on it goes. And the Native American legends of the red-haired giants that were 8, 9 feet, 10 feet tall, the Nephilim lance, which is in the book, this incredible artifact that Bob Shelley found, and we've had tested. It's almost pure copper. The copper in it's just very, very pure. And, you know, there was no dating on it. Couldn't give us an idea. We're actually trying to find a weapons expert to see if they know what this thing is. It's a lance, according to Chief Joseph Riverwind, who examined it with me and Bob Shelley at the Nephilim Mounds Conference in Ohio in June of this year. It's a lance, and this thing is huge, man. It's like 31 inches long. It's 7.5 pounds, and we have photographs of it. We talk about it in On the Trail too, but you can't use this thing for anything. I mean, as a sword, there's no way I can wield it. And you put a handle on the lance, and what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? It's not going to work for someone my size, but you put a 9-footer behind it, and now you've got something that validates the Native American legends where the tall, red-haired, cannibalistic giants would come in to the tribes, and their lancers would pierce and run through 3 of the braves at a time. That's the legend, and Chief Joseph told us that, and that's all in the book.
Yeah, I recall reading that, and the artifacts that were found, and that you have depicted in the book, I would be hard pressed to, just handing them. If you were to show them again, using a courtroom type venue, place them as exhibits in a courtroom. I'd be very hard pressed to refute such evidence based on really anything. I mean, you said it flat out nicely. You know, you cannot have these types of objects being handled by men of normal size, obviously. So you did a very good job. Yeah, go ahead.
And this is what starts to happen. If we only come up with one thing, and unfortunately for the Vieira buggers, so far they haven't come up with a whole lot, which is unfortunate, which is why they bring me into the show, because I've got some real hardcore evidence, and that's what we've got other stuff which we have not shown anybody yet. And some of that will be on the Trail of the Nephilim 3, and there's different sites that we know about which are trying to get permission from Native American tribes to go in and just exhume what's there. And that's, good luck with that, but maybe it will happen, and that's what we're trying to do. What's interesting is after a while, the evidence starts to stack up. And that's where we are. You get the Nephilim lance. You get the huge, huge hammer found 13,000 feet above sea level in Ecuador at a site which has not yet been excavated. And I paid an explorer, Bruce Fenton, to go in there and take photographs, which we did, and that's in the book. This huge, huge artifact, what the heck is it? And where is it from? And who made this thing? It's a huge hammerhead, and it's as long as your arm. It's just stupid long and way too heavy. You can't wield it. 27.5-pound axe heads that we have in On the Trail 1, the 3-foot, almost 3-foot Nephilim lance, these huge cranial deformation or skulls that we see with red hair in Paracas, the evidence from Ralph Glidden. And I mean, it just goes, after a while, you start building a case. And that's what we're doing. We're building a case that something's going on. We're not sure yet. It's not conclusive. But we think we've got enough evidence. And all the evidence keeps pointing back to the biblical narrative. And this is what's driving some people absolutely bonkers. Because if the biblical narrative is true, then that means it's a supernatural. And if it's a supernatural, and if there's this figure, then we've got to deal with Jesus and sin and salvation and all this other stuff. And they're terrified of it.
100% in agreement with you. One of the questions that we got, and we were talking about the Nephilim, I don't recall the show precisely or the date, but I do recall an email from a woman who asked a question, and I'll let you answer this, what your thoughts are with regard to this particular question. In fact, I printed it out and saved it for tonight, knowing you'd be on. L.A., with respect to the giants, are giants used in every sense of the word, okay, and Are they alive today? If they are, where are they? Why aren't we seeing them? What do you say to people who ask these questions?
Well, we know that a lot of the remains, let me put it to you this way. The so-called Hopewell culture, which a lot of the graves that were exhumed 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feet, okay, somewhere in there, 9-footers. Let's just round it up to 9-footers. That culture's 3,000 years ago, and they vanish and no one knows where they went. Cahokia, same thing. Paracas, same thing. And Paracas culture dies off around 2,000 years. No one knows what happened to them. They just kind of vanish. No one knows. They're here for a period of time. They vanish. They're gone. The fallen one, Satan, is very, very interested in the human genome. And this is where the whole idea of multiple incursions come in. He's trying to create man in his own image, combined with the giantism. And I was just recently in a private museum about a month and a half ago, which will be included in On the Trail 3. We saw very, very tiny artifacts, extremely tiny artifacts for small people, really small people, and like 2-foot small people, okay? And this ties right in with the Cherokee legends, that this race was there alongside the giants. And, of course, all this to academia is just laughable. Oh, these axe heads are for children. Oh, really? Says who? Because you say it is? When the Native Americans give us a completely different story. Well, the Native Americans don't have a written language, L.A., so we just can't believe anything that they say. Well, says who? Says you, the white man? Because you know, we have a written language, and you're looking at all this stuff, and you've got a PhD after your name, and that means that you know everything on the planet? Is that why we should believe you, and not the Native American oral tradition, which tells us that there's a race of very tiny little people, and now we find artifacts that seem to back this up? I mean, you know, we find 27.5-pound axe heads, other axe heads that are way too heavy. We find mauls, which will be in On the Trail 3, that use to break up flint, which weigh 35, 40 pounds. You know, you really want to pick that rock up, bring it over your head, and smash it down on a flint pit. Good luck with that. Let me know how that works out for you. I mean, come on. The evidence is there, and it's starting to stack up. But see, it goes against the Darwinian paradigm. And Darwinism is still very much in high esteem and basically sacrosanct in academia and the scientific community. Ben Stein's movie, Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, explores this in just an incredible, erudite way. And if you have not seen that movie, you need to go rent that movie after the show and see what Darwinism is really responsible for. And go back into the early part of the 20th century and see the eugenics and Planned Parenthood and how the one race is inferior to the other. Go back and look at all that. That's all from Darwinism, which, of course, that's a dirty little secret. Oh, we just cleaned all that up and it's really okay now. Oh, is it really? It's not. Survival of the fittest, that's where Hitler, a strong case could be made that Hitler used Darwinism and used the idea of survival of the fittest to pin the Jew as a vermin, as a scapegoat for all of Germany's ills, as a life that was not worth life at all, and that's why the Holocaust. And that's what Stein explores in his groundbreaking documentary, Expelled. And here we are. And we're proving, not conclusively yet, but so far, the evidence is pointing to the biblical narrative as being the correct one, that there is a creator, there is a cosmic chess match going on in another realm, in another dimension. These entities are vying for position. It goes back to Genesis 3. Your seed will be at enmity with the seed of the woman. And that's exactly what we see. Why should we be surprised when all of a sudden the Bible is comes alive and the evidence is everywhere? Why should we be surprised by this? Why should some of us feel threatened?
Fantastic summation. It's almost as if you're giving Not your closing argument, but it certainly sounds like that because again, look at what's going on. Something caught my eye. I got to tell you, something caught my eye besides that wonderful picture on your blog about Monday mornings. That was me about 4:00 this morning, folks. Anyway, a couple of things caught my eyes. Caught my attention here. You had mentioned. I got two questions. Well, before I hit the question I was going to ask you just now, let me go back into something you said earlier. You said about having, a woman being pregnant, missing time.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, unless I missed it, did you say that there was a birth did occur or not? Did you confirm any of that?
They took it.
Okay. All right. I just want to be clear about that. They took it. Okay.
They took it, and that's what we're trying to prove. Yeah, they took it. That's what we're trying to prove. We're working on that.
All right. I didn't want to close this hour out without kind of getting clarification on that. And all right, because when you say they, go ahead.
ET. First of all, we have the placenta, believe it or not. And we're going to get that tested. We're going to take DNA samples from it. We're going to take it to a forensic pathologist. And if there's anyone listening who is a forensic pathologist, please email me at la@lamarzulli.net. But the woman's doctor looked at the pictures and said there's no way that there was a child there. She was taken about 10 to 12 weeks after she was pregnant, which is classic.
Oh.
That's in the first trimester. I've written about that extensively. I've talked to other people about this happening. That's when they come back and abduct the female and then take the baby. And then you think you've miscarried. But there's no embryo. There's no fetus. There's nothing there, just the placenta.
And I've got a number of questions with respect to that tactic, not with this specific case, but the tactic of which you described. But I'll save them until after the top of the hour. Folks, we're talking with our very special guest, Mr. L.A. Marzulli. I got to tell you, if you go to L.A. just go to Hagmann and Hagmann, click on the link. It'll take you directly to L.A.'s site, lamarzulli.net. That's lamarzulli.net. And if you go to the store section, I cannot think of a better buy here, especially for Christmas, for Christmas gifts or whatever holiday gift you might want to give. For example, On the Trail of the Nephilim special, Bar Magazine special, 1 and 2, and Watcher 6, under $50. You can't beat that. And the quality, folks, you're just going to love the quality of the not just the quality of the evidence, but how the presentation, how it's presented. That's my big thing too. I like it when things are laid out, shown very nicely, and Ellie does a great job. Joe?
With that, we will take the top of the hour break, folks. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, December 8th. Ladies and gentlemen, hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Today, this Monday, with L.A. Marzulli as our guest. His latest book, On the Trail of the Nephilim 2, New Archaeological Research. Go check that out at lamarzulli.net. And L.A., I don't know if you are familiar with this. I know you've been doing a lot of research and getting the book out and then doing a lot of interviews explaining what's in the book. But the government, as well as other big business corporations, have been doing a lot of human genome studies. Also, one here, Towards a New History and Geography of Human Genes Informed by Ancient DNA. And in some of these publications, they talk about accessing information through ancient DNA, and the work is being done by MIT, Harvard, Department of Biological Sciences at Columbia, the Department of Genetics at Harvard, New York Genome Center, New York City, Howard Hughes Medical Institution, and Harvard Medical School, Boston. The list goes on. But what they say is that the genetic information contains a record of the history of the species, and new technologically advanced science mechanisms have transformed the ability to access these records. And they go on to also state that not only can they use this information to see where the original location or the ancestry leads into the distant past. But they also go on to say that there is other information being able to be unlocked in the DNA. And I'll state one example that they use here, actual memories of a person. Well, so let's say my father, someone extracts DNA from him and he gives it to me, his son, and all of a sudden I have all the understanding and information and memories he had. Have you heard anything along these lines in your research?
Well, yes. Let me put it to you this way. Gary Stearman, a couple of conferences ago, I forget where we were, maybe in Orlando, Gary and I were, talking about what On Trail 2 was, and the things, the Grout Glidden photographs on Catalina, and the six-fingered skeletons, and just all the stuff, and the stuff we saw in Peru, the skeletons in Peru, and we were just discussing things, and we were just alone. And Gary looked at me and said, L.A., you can be sure that they, and we both knew who they were, that they already know about this and already have taken this DNA samples from this stuff, and they've already analyzed it to see what it is. And the light bulb went off, and we know that some of these very large, elongated skulls are being sold on the black market. One of them in particular, there's a dealer apparently in Belgium who is buying these things. They go on the black market for about $1,000 a pop. And, this deal, Belgium, you could make a strong case, is a hotbed of occult activity in Europe. And why are the skulls being bought by this guy and being shipped back there? The shamans in Peru and in Bolivia place a great importance on these elongated skulls. They know that there's power there. And, that's a whole other conversation to get into. When we are there on these sites, walking through these graveyards, we pray before, during, and afterwards. We don't. It's not a cavalier, a couple of guys with a six-pack of brew on a frat party or something, going tomb robbing. It's not what's going on here. We hold all these sites with a certain respect and awe. Too far to go reverence, because we're not sure what we're looking at, but we have a great deal of respect wherever we go. And Brian in particular, and so obviously Senior Juan, anything that we have found, and we found 3 very large elongated skulls the last time I was at Chongos. The Wakaros got spooked, literally, and fled the scene. And I discovered one, and the moment we got up to it, Brian had already ran up the hill and was there. He found 2 more, and that's where the grave had been just opened up. Very, very shallow grave, 3 feet, 2 or 3 feet. And so it's at the end of the Paracas era, and those skulls made it into the new book. But they are now, all 3 of them, are for the Peruvian people. They are all resting safely in Senior Juan Navarro's Paracas Historical Society. And that's what's at stake here. So, that's
interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and you state that very, very nicely. I don't know what people think, for example, about your archaeological digs. I like how you said, it's not just a thrown together type thing. You approach this with a great deal of seriousness and reverence, and you do pray before, during, and after, and I think that's very important, especially with what you're dealing with. You're dealing with some very dark issues, and you mentioned this collector out of Belgium. Obviously, I think we can make the conclusion, or certainly without making a conclusion, I think we could strongly suspect what's going on there. But
yeah,
how do you know? When you say black market, is there a Craigslist for these things?
No.
I guess people in the know kind of like drug dealers. They know where to go, right? Or drug addicts know where to go to find the dealers. I suppose it's the same way, right?
And that's, yeah, I mean, it's very subversive, very bizarre, I'm sure. It's a world which I don't know anything about and really, frankly, don't want to enter into it. Very seedy, very bizarre. But some of these people were using these objects, we believe, and when I say we, I know Russ Dizdar and I have talked about this, and we believe they are using them in occult practices. That's what we think is going on.
Okay, and speaking of Russ, and if we might, I'd like to do a little bit of a change up here, because on your blog, on your blog, folks, go to LAMarzulli.net and of course visit his blog. He's got a wonderful picture from Monday morning musings with Marzulli. One of the entries, in fact, the second entry for today, is something I just want to touch upon to the extent that you feel comfortable with and you want to take it.
Sure.
Katy Perry performing at the next Super Bowl, the halftime show. We all know, folks who listen to the show, we know that we are being bathed in occult symbolism. And that Super Bowl halftime show is kind of like a, definitely up there in terms of something that's watched, and by watching it, we are almost unwitting participants in this kind of dark arts, black magic, if you will. And Katy Perry is certainly a poster child for that. What do you make of this? Of all of the entertainers, and we see Katy Perry coming onto the scene quite heavily. Last time she did Dark Horse with. I can't remember the artist's name, but if you want to call him that. But, it seems like it's all of these are incantations almost. I mean, and we're seeing an upsurge in this, aren't we? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Chuck Missler refers to a managed agenda, a carefully managed agenda. And that's exactly what's going on. All of this, every bit of it, is managed. They know exactly what they're doing. It's we're so far down the rabbit hole. It's sort of embarrassing. What I mean by that is the church thinks everything is hunky dory for the most part, although other aspects of the church and pastors are waking up. Hallelujah! But a lot of it is still slumbers. Meanwhile, Katy Perry's at the look. A couple of years ago, when Madonna was there, I'm at this so-called Christian Super Bowl party, right? And I like to go for the little mini weenies. Love those things, okay? And, I never know who's playing until probably 2 or 3 days before. And, okay, and I pick one team and root for it. And, I watch the game and it's over, right? So the halftime thing is there, and Madonna's doing her thing. And I'm sitting there going, this is in your face, Illuminati, sex magic. I can't believe I'm looking at this. And I look over, and all the girls who, are well over 40 at this point because they grew up with Madonna, they're all lip-syncing the lyrics, just singing right along. And it's going right over their heads. And it's like, are you kidding me? So it'll be interesting to see what Katy Perry does. There is a carefully managed agenda. It is anti-Christian all the way. You cannot mention the J word anywhere. The whole thing with Merry Christmas. And look, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. I get it. Please don't write me with the whole Saturnalia stuff. I get it. I understand all that. But Christmas for millions and millions of Christians the world over, we celebrate his birth. That's what it is to us. We're celebrating the birth of the Messiah. Okay? And yeah, it's gotten commercialized. Yeah, it's wacky. I'm doing the same thing on my blog. Holiday special, Christmas special, blah, blah, blah. We all do it. We're in the world, hopefully not of it. But the reason why we're doing it, and look, other authors are doing the same thing. You give a person an on trail of a Nephilim too, you're gonna rock their world. You give them a Watcher's set, you're gonna rock their world. Trust me, you're gonna rock their world. You give them a calendar. The conversation is going to start. And that's what we want. Because a lot of times you can't go, it says in Matthew 24. You can't do that. They don't want to listen. But you hand them a Watcher's set or a book, and it doesn't have to be my stuff. It can be, Chris Putnam's book, Exo Vaticana. Oh, my gosh, if you got a Catholic family, that would get people talking. Hello? That's what it's about,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You know what? You keep guys like Chris Putnam and myself writing and doing what we're doing, because when you buy the book, guess what? Now we got money to write another one, and a workman's entitled to his wages, and that's what we're doing. It's all for the King, every bit of it. It's all for the King. That's who it all points back to. He's coming again, and he's coming soon. In the meantime, we're here. We're slogging away in the trenches. There's nobody. We've got no sugar daddy necessarily for the Watcher series. Richard Shaw and I have produced all of those on our own nickel, and we plow back a lot of the money that we make through the shows. By the way, we sold 90,000 DVDs. 90,000 DVDs.
That's incredible.
Pretty cool. 90,000 Watcher DVDs. Thank you. It actually should have a couple of zeros, and that's just our little marketing thing. And you get on some big shows like Sid Roth, who I think did, he bought probably close to 10,000 DVDs from us when he was done. And that show, that half-hour show, is his number 2 watch show in the history of Sid Roth Ministries. It's almost a million hits. Go figure. We found the Nephilim, and there it is.
And folks, you can be part of this as well. Show LA that we can make an impact, and that I'd like to think what we do, certainly from tonight's show. If you take advantage of these holiday specials, and yes, I said holiday, but take advantage of them because they're well worth it. I'll say that. I love your calendar, by the way. I do. I love the Watcher's calendar. I've got one here for 2015.
Cool,
yeah, it really is a great idea. So, folks, do take advantage. And I can guarantee you, when LA says it'll rock your world, it does. The research, the amount of information, and the conclusion or the suggestions that you will find, the conclusions that you will come to, and rightfully so, based on the evidence submitted, will shake your paradigm. And I think that this is what it's all about. And you know what? I can feel we're all getting close. When you've got Chris Putnam and others, Tom Horn, Steve Quayle, Tim Alberino, I'm trying to think, lots of people coming to the table with their research product. You've got this synchronicity, if you will, and it really makes what's written in the Bible, at least to me, come alive, and it really has contemporaneous impact upon me. In other words, the Bible is not just a book of history, but there's this contemporaneous factor to it, and it helps you to understand. At least it helps me. Your work and others helps me to understand not only why we're here, but what we need to do, while we're here, and also it puts things in perspective. You've got a great way of doing that through your writings, and Paul McGuire too, and others, Bill Salas, with geopolitical events with respect to Israel. So all of this, I don't want to dominate, but I just have to say that I think that what we're seeing now through the explosion, through the internet, and this explosion of knowledge is really, to me, bringing things really close together. And that's, by the way, how's that affecting the other side, the dark side, the Illuminati, the Luciferians? That's got to be making them step up their game as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. They know that time is short. They know they're waiting for their prince to come. I believe he's already here and walking perhaps among us. Who knows? Again, go back to Tom Horn and Chris Putnam's book, Exo Vaticana. Just incredible. And the Vatican is sort of bracing themselves for an alien savior, which is bizarre to even think about. I mean, here we are talking about this stuff. It's incredible. And the fact that information, you mentioned the internet, the fact that information is shared at the speed of light, the speed of light. In other words, when the Fukushima reactor goes off and the tidal wave, the big 9.0 Fukushima earthquake, right? And it rocks Japan, and the tidal wave comes in. We're watching live coverage of that from the helicopter bouncing it off the satellite. That's live. That's live. That's the world we live in. You get an 8.0 earthquake or something, and my iPhone goes ding, ding, ding. When they're launching rockets from Gaza into Israel, I have an app on my phone that's from Israel. It's called Red Alert. And when the war was going on several weeks back, that thing was going off all day long, man. Precisely at the moment when the rockets are on.
It's difficult
I have to wait
to
for the 6 o'clock news.
Right, and think. Yeah, I mean, think back to even the Walter Cronkite era when we were hamstrung to the 6 o'clock news. Now we know things right away or as they're happening, and I can compare that to your work with respect to the Nephilim and how this really, going back to your book and the Nephilim and the Watchers series and all of this, if people would just use their intellectual capacity, use their mind, if people just think what the impact that this information, the information that you are and have uncovered to where we are today, what's taking place today. I've got a question from a listener listening live right now in your area, your neck of the woods on the West Coast, who wants to know your feelings with respect to when we went into Iraq, Babylon, did we leave with any type of, anything extra, shall we say, any extra DNA, any extra artifacts? Did we remove anything? That's from Kathleen, wanting to know that, listening live. Hi, Kathleen, and I'll let L.A. answer that.
Well, I defer back to Tom on this one because, Tom certainly wrote about that. I concur with Tom's finding. I think Steve Quayle also talked a little bit about what was going on there. It's bizarre when we actually go back and we look at what happened with the Bush administration and the whole 9/11 thing. I mean, that's like a 3-hour conversation in itself. But I bought the party line to someone read my Politics, Prophecy, and Supernatural book and said, L.A., you really need to do more research on 9/11 because when PPNS came out in 2006 or 7, whatever it was, I think it was 7, I believed in the party line, 9/11 and, the whole deal. And then they sent me Building 7, and the whole theory just collapsed. No pun intended. I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. And I started doing more research and then found, 9/11 truthers were 1,500 architects and engineers looking at this thing going, this is, buildings don't collapse like this. Sorry, folks. You can tap dance all you want, but something's real fishy here. And then, of course, Building 7, every year at the anniversary, I show that clip, which shows Building 7 basically imploding at free fall speed, which, again, is a physical impossibility for a building to collapse like that. Buildings don't collapse that way into its own footprint. So 9/11 is a staged event by a dark, satanic, hidden government. And to say that on radio anywhere brings certain consequences with it and lots of ridicule. But the evidence is overwhelming that something's going on. Nanothermite, dustification, I mean, all these, when you watch the towers go down, you watch them disintegrate as they're collapsing. You watch them disintegrate. Something is going on there. Some weapon, scalar technology, I don't know. But we go into Afghanistan, no, let's go get those Afghans, blah, 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 Then I get the Taliban, and, Bush does this thing, if you're either with us, you're with the terrorists. That whole deal. And it's just like, you got to be kidding me. And then all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, we go to Iraq. It's like, what? When that happened, I just went, what? What is he thinking? Look, Saddam and his sons were bloodthirsty, luciferic, demonically enhanced, probably almost possessed fully human beings. The stuff that they did thank God they're off the planet, all three of them. I mean, they reinvented the word barbarian. But why did we go in there? And think of the absolute mess we've created when ISIL, which I will not refer to it as Islamic State, or, whoa, what was that? Whoops, more mess. Islamic
Incoming.
State or anything else. Yeah, because it's not. The original name is the Islamic State of Syria, Iraq, and the Levant. And the Levant is Israel. That's what ISIL is. You can change and tap dance around that all you want, but your original name is ISIL. And your goal is Jerusalem and Mecca and Medina. That's what you want. And that's what they're trying to do. The King of Jordan recently stood up and, called them evil and all this other stuff, and he's panicked because they're right on his doorstep. And they've had some setbacks, but I predicted Baghdad will fall by the end of the year. I'm no prophet, but, we've only got a few days before that happens. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Great point.
Excellent.
Yeah. And thank you for that, because I know other people have done work on that. By the way, those people, and I know Joe's got a question here pending, but I just want to add this: when you make reference to ISIL, I understand their objectives, but I do have a problem with ISIS in terms of the acronym ISIS. Obviously, the references to the mythological, mythological Egyptian god.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot there, and I think that's kind of another in-your-face sort of thing taking place. And the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria being part of and the Levant. Well, that's a Western intelligence creation, I believe, but that's just based on the research I've done. So,
and I agree with you. They trained in Jordan, and then they went rogue, and here we are.
Exactly, and people following the geopolitical footsteps over there. Benghazi. Why do you think we'll never get the truth out about Benghazi? Well, of course, because that ultimately ISIL is an artifact of that Benghazi operation. If not directly, then certainly at its periphery. Joe, go ahead with your question. I know that you got one from a listener.
Yeah. This one is from Eric. He asks, in the flood of Noah, can it be possible that the sea creatures and life in the waters survived? Noah saved the land animals, but no sea creatures. My guess is that those never perished. What is your take, L.A.?
Yeah, basically, yeah, I would concur with that the creatures in the sea, Noah didn't have to do anything with those because they weren't being messed with, at least the ones that we think. The fallen ones seem to be messing with the animals, as far as we know. There was a show recently, a couple of years back actually, about the found mermaid. The whole thing was a creation. It was just a canard. The whole show, every bit of it. The scientists were actors. It was just somebody created this thing, and at the very end, when the credits roll by, you have to look really closely, and then you see that the whole thing is staged. It's a canard. It's a ruse. And the idea of mermaids and mermen, and that this was going on. But the Bible is not a canard. The Bible and what is there in the historical record of the Bible, the historicity of it specifically, states some very fascinating events. And some of those events we've already touched on, specifically the Nephilim. And wherever they are, the Nephilim, the judgment by a Most High God is always the same, wipe them all out. And I think this ties in with modernity, and I've spoken to this about on your show before, specifically with the so-called mark of the beast. I think why anyone who takes the mark winds up in the lake of fire is because their DNA, this mark is actually a DNA changer. Doug Hamp's book, Corrupting the Image, my book, The Cosmic Chess Match, delves into the idea that the fallen one is trying to create man in his own image, and he's doing it with this mark. And that's what's so incredible about it. We took the implant out of this guy, Bill, in Watchers 8, and That's hardcore physical evidence. It's funny how there's just dead silence from the skeptics now on that, where 4 or 5 years ago there was nothing but ridicule about, oh, implants, that's just nonsense. Oh, hey, who's making this? Well, some childhood injury, blah, blah, blah. We experienced such high strangeness in that operating theater, and we talk about this in Watchers 8. It was over-the-top supernatural, over-the-top spiritual warfare 2.0. And I've talked about that on your show before, how we went in there and we couldn't find the implant. It was gone. Gauss meter couldn't find it. Stud finder couldn't find it. The wand on the ultrasound machine, that couldn't find it. It's like, huh? Where 2 weeks later, we found it with the ultrasound machine in less than 2 minutes. It was like it was being closed. One prayer changed the atmosphere in that room, and the object floats into the image on the monitor. The image just floats in on the monitor. It's like, what? It was unbelievable. We talked about that today, actually, at practice, Richard and I. It was just astounding. And we it's all on film. Hagmann and Hagmann, it's all on film. Watchers 8. We show the whole thing, the whole process from Watchers 7 to Watchers 8. It's all scientific, on film. Guy was abducted when he was 5 years old. He's had the implant for 40 years. Here it is, X-ray, CAT scan, Gauss meter, giving off a frequency of 330 gigahertz, ultrasound machine, 2 surgeons looking at it, we know it's there. And then we show it out, and now we're in SEAL Lab, and we analyze it. I mean, this is hardcore science. And what is the skeptic saying that? I mean, how can you say anything? We're making it up. We're staging it. That's really all you can say, But we're not. We're not making it up. And it's hardcore physical evidence. So we're in the lab, and we're doing it. And that's what being on the trail is about. We want to get a conversation going. We want to steer the conversation back to the veracity of the biblical narrative.
Okay,
there you go.
L.A., we have a few questions about something you talked about in the first hour. If we could recover the little ones.
Yeah.
I've gotten a few emails, and there's some people in the interactive chat who are wondering, are the little ones that you described, was this some kind of genetic difference from the giants stemming from the same race, or was this something different?
This is what we think. This is all hypothetical. This is conjecture. This is our hypothesis. The fallen one is messing with the genome. He's trying to create man in his own image. He can't get it right. This is why when Joshua and Caleb go into the Levant, there are different Nephilim tribes there, and some of the names seem to denote certain genetic characteristics. For instance, the long necks. What the heck does that mean? The terrible ones. The Rephaim. All these names seem to point to genetic characteristics. The hybridization, which is going on now, they're trying to get man to look. In other words, he's trying to create man in his own image, but they're Nephilim. The hybrid beings apparently can pass for human, but they're very strange, and they may have certain traits which are not human. They may be telepathic. They may be able to move objects with their mind. They may be able to do all sorts of things like the X-Men. So that's what we think. And that part's conjecture, and that part's a little out there. I mean, I get it. Trust me, I get it. That part's out there. But at some point in time, if we're right, I don't believe the church will be here to see it, but if we're right, this stuff will start manifesting.
Very, very interesting. Okay. A question that dovetails your answer just now here. Let me see if I can put this. I mean, it's a 2-paragraph question. Thanks, John, for that. Out of Portland, Maine. Okay. So sorry for being word challenged here, but it's a complicated question. Let me see if I can boil it down to what he's asking. Bottom line, the our military, our intelligence services, to what extent are they involved, we'll say, in not just following your research, but having a research program of their own to the extent where they're developing or attempting to develop or have developed their own species of Nephilim? That's the crux of his question. And John, I hope I did you okay on that one. L.A., what do you say?
Ask it one more time, because he kind of was drawn out and I lost the... Ask it one more time.
Okay. The crux of the question is this. To what extent is our own intelligence agency, the CIA, or even the British intelligence services, or the Western intelligence services, and our military, any of these dark black ops programs, to what extent are they involved in the manipulation, creation, harvesting, or whatever of Nephilim?
I think that there's a shadow government that made a deal with the devil, literally. Gary Stearman, that's his quote. Not realizing what they were getting into. They got technology, but at what price? And they're up to their eyeballs in it. I'll tell you a story, and I've told this story before. But I was able to speak to a retired Air Force general, and he was actually a two-star general. And after interviewing a lot of people, you get to look at body language. And you guys know what I'm talking about. And you get to watch how people sit, what they do with their eyes, their hands, what they fidget, if they're nervous. You learn body language. It's part of what you do as an interviewer. You learn to watch the body language to see what people are really, if their body is jiving with what they're saying. Oftentimes the eyes, the windows to the soul, the eyes start darting around or looking away, you know you got trouble. So I'm talking to this guy and I'm asking him questions. This is years and years and years ago when I'm researching book 2 for On the Trail of the Nephilim. And I'm sorry, for the Nephilim trilogy. Sorry, book 2 in the Nephilim trilogy. And we're talking in his backyard, and it's probably 20 minutes into the interview, and he's very relaxed in his chair, and I'm lobbing softball questions, and very relaxed, and he's just, answering the questions, sipping on some lemonade, and slouched down. And then I zinged by the fastball after about 20 minutes. And my question was this: what was it like when you viewed the retrieved alien bodies from the Roswell space crash, from the Roswell disk crash in 1947? This guy's body language went off the charts, absolutely off the charts.
We can appreciate that as investigators. Yep. Go ahead.
He sits up, he crosses his legs, he looks around, he uncrosses them, crosses them again, fidgets in his chair, and all of a sudden, steely-eyed general is there, just looking at me and going, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm biting my tongue because I'm laughing, going, oh my gosh, I got him. And I did. I got him. Now, that doesn't mean anything, you can't use that in a court of law, but in my gut, I knew that I got him. He saw them. And there were some other things that he said, which I won't get into, and other conversations I have with this man. This man's a true patriot. He loves his country. And, it was an interesting interview, and that's a long time ago. But, look, the bottom line is some of the technology that we see now came from them. And once again, this goes right back into the days of Noah. This is why the Book of Enoch is so key, because all it does, it's like a handbook. And you know what? People need to get off their high horse about this. Like, Marzulli uses the Book of Enoch. Well, hello? What about when the Bible goes, is it not written in the Book of Jasher? Well, what about that? What are we supposed to do with that? Is it not written in the Book of Jasher? Does that mean they're pointing to us? You can't read the Book of Jasher. Well, they're referencing the Book of Jasher. Now they don't reference Enoch, but Enoch is quoted a whole bunch of times, upwards of 70 times in the Tanakh, and it's quoted in the New Testament. We can at least read it and appreciate its historicity. And the book of Enoch tells us that there's a quid pro quo, that the fallen angels can't get access to the women until they get permission. And they do that by tantalizing the men with primitive weapon making and technology. Fast forward thousands of years later, it's the same deal. Hey, can we have access to the women? Well, you can, but what are we going to get for it? Well, we'll give you these discs. Enter Bob Lazar, which many people think he is a false witness. I don't. I've met him. I've talked to him. I don't think Lazar is false at all. I think he was there. I think he saw them, the sports model. I think he handled it. I think he was blown away by what he saw. And then they were going to get him, and he went rogue. There was a quid pro quo. Access to the population for the technology. And who wouldn't do it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And by the way, L.A., I just want to say this, and Joe, you can jump in, but with your reference to the Book of Enoch, if this, and look, I've been to my share of crime scenes. I got to tell you, if a crime scene dictated, or if a piece of evidence was overlooked, I look at the Book of Enoch as evidence, okay, as a piece of evidence that's referenced by primary evidence. It might be secondary evidence, but it's evidence nonetheless. And to overlook that or to step away from it because it's not within the canon of the Holy Bible, it would be, to me, it's just an incredible act of negligence on my part as an investigator. Now, again, as secondary evidence, it may not hold the weight of the primary evidence, but you cannot just wantonly disregard it. Is that a fair statement, L.A.? I mean that's about how you look at it, right?
Wonder if we.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
I accidentally hit the mute button. Yeah. Why is it that some biblical scholars can quote? And by the way, it's a very fair statement. Why is it that biblical scholars can quote Josephus all day long and use Josephus, but somehow the Book of Enoch is, whoa, don't go there? I mean, come on. What's the difference? There is none. In fact, the Book of Enoch, in my opinion, because it's quoted in canon so many times, used and referenced 70 times in the Tanakh, I don't have all those references. I know Doug Hamp, for one, I think does. But, I mean, it's there. Why is it that the Bible tells us this is not written in the book of Jasher? And then when you get Josephus writing about Yeshua, Josephus writes very plainly that the Nephilim were on the earth and that the Israelites came up against them and that the bones of the Nephilim were openly on display as of his writing. So 2,000 years ago, the bones were there, and the bones were there to show Israel that it was real. So how did they get there? And that's the conundrum. That's the raging debate that puts people at odds with one another. There can't be a second incursion; it has to come from someplace else. Well, why? Why does it have to do that? Why can't there just be a second, third, fourth? Look, Sodom and Gomorrah to me is another incursion. The Tower of Babel is another incursion. Obviously, when they get to the Levant, another incursion. And remember, the Lord himself holds them there. Cosmic chess match, read it. It's deliberate. Well, I'm going to, your people are going to go down to Egypt. They're going to be there 400 years. What? Until the fullness of the sin of the Amorite. Are you kidding me? And we don't understand that until we understand the seed war, until we begin to see what's going on with the Nephilim. And this is what God always does. This is why I'm not concerned about the History Channel or Ancient Aliens. God always allows the fallen one and those who serve him, and I'm not saying if these people serve him. That's not what I'm saying. But that's what he does. He allows the fallen one, shoot your wad, man. Deal all your cards. Give me your best shot. And then he sends his man or his men or his women in, and things change. And he does it over and over and over again in Scripture.
All right. L.A., changing gears here, we're told in Scripture and by the Lord himself in the New Testament and by the Old Testament prophets that in the last days that there are going to be things that are coming from under the earth and onto the earth.
Mm-hmm.
How many different, we don't have to get too specific, are there more than one, I guess you'd say, species or types of the fallen ones? And when I say the fallen ones, their ancestry, we know that the Nephilim had giants, and then the giants from there continued their lineage, as we see the end of it playing out now. Was their size changed? How did they mask themselves to continue to be the tyrants and oppressors of today, yet seemingly appear as regular humans?
Well, that's an incredible question. We know that, and Chuck Missler refers to this in Watchers 1. Chuck says they're not getting what they want. And they're not getting what they want because our DNA changed. We know that happened back at the Tower of Babel. That's when our God himself somehow changed all of humankind DNA. How the heck did he do that? That's why he's God. So everything changed back then. And we stopped living 500, 600 years to 900 years. Now our days are only 120. So things changed back at the garden. They change after the flood. And they're going to change again now. The following one, this breeding program that the so-called aliens are involved in is a very closely guarded secret. We believe it has reached its zenith. It's finished. They've got what they wanted, and have I seen a hybrid? No. Do I want to see one? No. But we feel that at some point they will be released. We've gotten reports from people that have had encounters with beings that look, I'll just tell you one, okay? This guy who's now a Christian, and this is the incident that blew him over the edge. And basically his book, my book, was instrumental, and also we talked to him on the phone in having him come to the Lord. So this guy was a UFO contactee. He had seen ships and been abducted, the whole deal. And he moved out of one area into another area to get away, to try to live a normal life. And this woman followed him to the new location. And they were dating, and she followed him. And so one night he's over there, and the woman and her friend is there. This woman has this very strange, peculiar habit. Remember, they're just dating. And that habit was she always wore sunglasses, never took them off. And he found it odd, but, he's doing drugs and, he's involved in stuff he shouldn't be involved in. And so what does he care, right? No discernment. And remember, at this time, he's not a Christian. So we're sitting around in her new apartment or her house, whatever it is, and they're having drinks together, cocktails, and I'm not making this up. I wish I was, and I mean that because it's bizarre. They're seated together, and a fly lands on her wine glass. And her tongue flicks out 10 inches, a foot, and snags the fly. And he is absolutely startled. He can't believe what he just saw. And at that point, she takes off her sunglasses, and she's got reptilian eyes. They're not human. And wow. He runs out of the house, absolutely freaked out, terrified, freaked out to the nines. And he tells me the story in the presence of a mutual friend who had been witnessing to this guy, and he came to the Lord.
That would be, yeah. Go ahead, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, the thought of that.
Wow.
Look, I can't bet that, and, every skeptic on the planet's going to say, oh, that makes great radio. I'm just telling you, truthfully and honestly, what this man, and he can repeat the story. I mean, I could have him come in and pixelate the guy's face or have him come on the radio. People still won't believe it. That's fine. Believe what you want to believe. This man came of the Lord because of it. Stuff's happening. He's not the only person who's seen stuff like this. It's happening. There is a breeding program, the black-eyed kids that we talked about in Watchers. It's real. Satan is doing stuff. Men think from fear from what is coming upon the earth. Even the elect would be deceived in those days if it were possible. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. Satan comes with all signs of lying wonders. There is a supernatural. And until we understand and embrace the supernatural paradigm, put on the armor of God on a daily basis, understand what the reason is, why we're here to do, and begin to talk about the biblical narrative, dominate the conversation, and point people back to the Lord, we're asleep at the wheel. We're losing the match. Come on, guys, wake up.
Yeah, and one just needs to listen to one of thousands of stories from Russ Dizdar, as he is one who deals with the multi-personality, the possessed, and John Kyle also. We've seen it personally in at a conference, and some of the stories he tells, that Russ tells, it does startle you. It does. It's surprising, if not shocking, to your mind to hear things like this. But these stories are increasing. People with sleep paralysis, they a lot of times they state that during their paralysis they have some kind of entity that is oppressing them, either sitting on their chest or in their presence. There's an increase in activity in the sky. I can, for one, state that something is wrong with the stars. They're not moving correctly, and they are, not only are they not moving correctly, they are too far out of the natural orbit or way that they used to be, as I remember them. And I've been looking at the sky for a while now. You have the stuff going on in the Middle East with the nations listed in Daniel, listed in Isaiah, Ezekiel, that in the end times, in the last days, we would see these destructive forces happen to these countries. We're seeing the blood moon, the tetrads, the economic calamity we're facing here. There's no shortage of tension or and the natural disasters that are increasing. And you have the Weather Channel naming the winter storms now after ancient Greek mythological gods. All the signs are in our face.
I agree.
It's just, these things are happening, and the Lord, not only it happened once and he took care of it, but he told us what was coming again, and he told us how to prepare ourselves for what was coming again. And we can't stress enough, no matter how much food, gold, bullets, and guns you have, makes no difference. If the spiritual preparedness and your spiritual foundation is not set, well, you better get that worked out, because that is the only thing, as we're told, the weapons that we will use in this upcoming battle are not physical, but they are spiritual weapons. And who will we be using spiritual weapons against? Spiritual entities of darkness. So, as Scripture states, and if we can all agree that Scripture is accurate, there are spiritual entities of darkness that did not come from the line of God's seed or Abel. It came from Cain's seed, as it says in John. It says, he was not, don't be a murderer like that wicked one from the line of Cain. So there's a distinction that there are two seeds on the earth, and we're told that the devil will come posing as an angel of light, exalting himself above all that is called God, showing himself to be God in the temple of God. And these are the things that we have to look forward to. And from Scripture, as it was in the days of Noah, so too shall it be in the coming of the days of the Son of Man. It doesn't get any clearer than that. The Lord hasn't come back to the earth yet. He is coming back, and things are looking like they are explained in Enoch and in the Bible, where in Timothy it gives a long description of the attributes of people in the last days, and does Enoch. There was wicked men thought of nothing but wickedness and evil continually. Have we not seen man be turned into something that has been completely have had their thoughts and brain and focus completely removed from anything that is of God and focused everywhere else. I guess that wasn't even a question, but the signs are all around us, from Fukushima to, and we have a question for you about Nibiru and Planet X and what your thoughts are on that, L.A. I guess if you want to answer that, get into that now, this would be a good time. We got about 5 minutes before the break, and I wasn't sure, as we have not talked about this on or off air before, do you believe in a Planet X or Nibiru? And if so, does it have anything to do with the ancient ones?
Well, it's interesting. You know, this has been kicked around. We actually talked about it in one of our Watchers film. I think it was maybe 3 or 4, I forget what it was. But we had Marshall Masters on, who was the proponent of the Planet X theory, and he was absolutely convinced that it was going to happen. We had Chris White give a rebuttal on camera to that, and basically there was no trickery in the editing. We let each person say what they wanted to say, and the whole Planet X thing has come and gone, and it is what it is. And look, we're seeing other signs in the heavens that may or may not have anything to do with, like, Planet X. We're seeing very, very large craft out there, strange craft. I mean, we've seen some stuff. We showed this in Watchers 8, that way up in the infrared spectrum, way up there. And we're going, what the heck are they doing? I mean, it's just bizarre. And we show that in Watchers. So, look, people can't be myopic. We've got to look at the whole picture. We got to look at wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. That's Jesus, what he's saying. And we look at everything that's going on. We look at Fukushima. Look at the drought in California. Thank God we just got some rain. But look at the drought down in Sao Paulo. Look at the earthquakes. Look at the Ring of Fire. Look at the volcanic activity. The threat of a supervolcano. The Bartabunga. Huge supervolcano. Huge caldera in Iceland. The Yellowstone, is that thing going to go? Look at the collapse of the dollar. Look at the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, all trying to get off the petrodollar and form a new currency. Look at Vladimir Putin. Look at the saber rattling in the Middle East. Look at North Korea. Look at Iran trying to get the bomb. Look at Israel, surrounded now by countries who are posing a direct existential threat to her. How's that going to happen? Look at the after effects of Fukushima, the radiation polluting. How much of the Pacific we really don't know, can't get a straight answer out of anybody. Look at the threat of ISIL. Look at the Islamics now taking over the conversation in all throughout Europe. Look at the Islamization in America here. Look at the jihad. Look at ISIL carving up huge swaths of Iraq. I mean, look at Africa, where again Islam is just blatantly just killing people, just walking into villages and wholesale murder. Think of the Christians, 250,000 Christians being expelled right now in Iraq as we speak. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not. Look at the weird weather patterns. Look at the birds falling out of the sky, the whales washing up, the sea life drowning, washing up by the hundreds of thousands. I mean, this stuff is unbelievable, and it's happening right now in real time on this planet. It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So is this business as usual? In my opinion, the answer is absolutely no. We are moving into the last days, headed towards the time of Jacob's trouble.
Fantastic. And L.A., you write it very well in your blog. And folks, again, we're talking with L.A. Marzulli, lamarzulli.net. Definitely go to his blog and subscribe as well. There's a little tab on the right where you can follow and subscribe. You'll get an email with a link to confirm your subscription, by the way. So definitely confirm your subscription when you do get the email. We're followers. But I like how you frame your overall conversation. If we had just would take a couple of steps back here and look at just you did a great wrap up of what we don't see on the 6 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news or 10 o'clock news, whatever it might be. Everything that you're talking about and everything that you have, and I noticed this as well, whether it's your Watchers series or your the books on Nephilim, they're designed in some way, as you put it, to introduce the reader or in the case of the Watcher series, the Viewer 2, the biblical narrative. And you wrote the Cosmic Chess Match, of course. You make it very clear in the Cosmic Chess Match about Jesus being the way to salvation. So, in the end, I just love it. I just love the way your presentation, how you present everything, and everything does lead to the great, holy, and inerrant Word of God, the Bible, and it does make the Bible come alive if you apply some intellectual prowess to your work. If you just think about your work, consider what you've written, it does make the Bible come alive, and that to me, I appreciate it. I got to tell you that to me will and has done more for people than anything you could possibly do. What a great gift that you've given the viewer, the reader, and the listener too, of this and your own broadcast of the biblical narrative. And I want to thank you for that. I mean, it's a great thank you. Just thank you.
Yeah, and I got a question. As you're on the trail of the Nephilim, are you going to get to a point where you're catching up, or you're with the? you
ever catch them?
Yeah.
Well, what we're trying to do, we have sites. Again, we're trying to get the DNA evidence out of Peru and Bolivia. We've got sites in the Americas, which we're trying to get permission from Native American tribes to go in and exhume what we believe are 9 or 10 footers. Once we get that, if we get the DNA evidence, and I'm believing that we're going to at some point, that's a game changer. And is my work done? No. I mean, it's just, there's so many sites to look at. We want to nail this thing down. It's taken this long just to get to this point. And, at some point, my work will be done with this and I can move on. There's a book I'm working on in tandem with this one, and that'll be out at some point. But I'm really focused on this. God's raised me up for this. I've been groomed for it. My mentor was the late Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's book, The Omega Conspiracy, which really is the primer for anyone who's interested in the Nephilim. I cut my teeth on that. I cut my teeth on Chuck Missler, whose book, Alien Encounters and the Nephilim, was in tandem with Dr. Thomas's book. And I'm just, I received my honorary doctorate from Dr. Thomas. And when that happened, he was in his late 80s.
Wow.
And, he put that mantle over me. And my wife and I just looked at each other and we just went, it's like Elijah and Elisha. It's the same. And we knew. And from that moment on is when he just let it go from that moment on. And he entrusted it to me. And I mean that. I mean, he entrusted it to me. I remember going to him and asking him maybe like 6 months later, maybe not even 6 months. And he just looked at me and he just said, well, that's yours now. That's for you to find out. And I realized that he was old and he knew it. And, he never said the Lord told me someone would come. He never told me anything like that. But I just felt that something was passed on that day. And I owe him a debt, and thank you, Dr. Thomas. He was an amazing man.
L.A., all I can say is thank you so much for your gift of time, and please thank your wife for us as well. I know, people don't understand taking away from your family and sharing with us the latest information. I'll tell you something, L.A., I got a lot out of your book, and I do highly recommend people take advantage of your book from lamarzulli.net. Take advantage of the special as well. And if you're really full of vinegar, shall we say, get the big special. I guarantee you. And also Cosmic Chess Match too. I started reading that again, and it's amazing what you forget that you've read or that you put aside. It's really relevant to everything happening today. And I just want to thank you so much again for your gift of time tonight, for your wife Thanks to your wife as well. And thanks for your hard work. And by the way, one other thing, from an investigative point of view, I want to thank you very much for the way you put the information together and submit it for the reader and for the viewer as well, because I think it's very important, and you do it in such a way where it's very credible and very, well, you'd make a good crime scene investigator. I'll just say that.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, guys. Really do. Merry Christmas to you, and look forward to another time together in the near future.
All right, brother. Thank you so very much. God bless.
God bless you.
You, your wife, your ministry, and keep up the good work. And we appreciate what you do, and we will have you back on sooner than later, hopefully. You have a good night.
God bless. Bye-bye.
God bless you, too. That was L.A. Marzulli, folks. His website, lamarzulli.net. His latest book, On the Trail of the Nephilim 2, New Archaeological Research. It is his latest of a large body of work of not only books but DVDs, which are fantastic to look at when thinking about the Genesis account and the giants that came or were born from angels mating with women who were human. A lot of questions arise from this topic. A lot of interest is in this topic, and rightfully so. We have been slaves one way or another through history, and it was a racial thing in America until the Civil War. But economically, we are all slaves, and there are powers and tyrants and oppressors, as there were back then. There are people starting one world government against God, as there were back in Nimrod's day. It's too similar to be coincidence, and it's in Scripture. Folks, we're going to go to our top of the hour break. We're going to come back with some news and your phone calls at 661-244-9839. After these short messages, stay with us, ladies and gentlemen, to the third and final hour of this Monday edition of the Hagmann Hagmann Report. If you joined us late, we had L.A. Marzulli on the first 2 hours talking about his new book, On the Trail of the Nephilim 2, the new archaeological research. Check that out at lamarzulli.net, and go back and listen to the archive if you did not get a chance to listen live. We're going to be hitting some news and taking calls this hour. First, I want to say Pastor Paul Begley had surgery today, and it was a successful surgery. He is awake and in some pain. He's not going to be able to talk for 2 weeks. And in his absence, his wife Heidi is going to be filling in as host for most of the shows. And on this Thursday, my father and I will be joining her as a guest host on his show. And also, I want to ask for prayers for Pastor Paul for fast healing, as his vocal cords were where the surgery took place, and he was having problems with his voice, for those who have listened to him, and he is going to be unable to speak for a few weeks. And that's when I talked to him yesterday, I'm thinking, 2 weeks of not being able to talk, and you're a minister and a radio show host, that's hard. That's got to be hard. But he said, it'll give me a chance to listen. And as when you're talking all the time and you're ministering all the time, sitting back and being able to sit back and listen could be a huge benefit for him. But I just ask that you keep him in your prayers and his family in your prayers for a quick recovery and successful healing, because we don't know, how long we have on this earth, and the time we do have left, we need the people who are on the front lines to be in 100%. And Pastor Paul is one of our favorite people, favorite pastors, favorite guests, and we need him, and we appreciate his work. And
let's all say a prayer. Yeah, let's all say a prayer for Pastor Paul, his wife, children. It's tough when you're infirm like that and you're impaired like that. And I remember, I got to tell you, folks, it scared me whenever that mystery virus hit me with that in the throat. I've always had throat problems, and since I was a little kid, and I had a tonsillectomy, but never went to the hospital. In other words, my tonsils were somehow burned out by some infection. I don't know how that happens. I don't know what the clinical name is, nor do I really care. But I had a doctor tell me when I was, I don't know, maybe 30 or something, that I didn't have any tonsils because of, I don't know, I wore them out apparently or something. Anyway, tonight as well, I just learned, thank you to my lovely, beautiful wife, handed me a note. I just learned that I'll be top of the hour on Coast to Coast talking about, well, what Tom Danheiser said, 36 bankers' deaths, suspicious bankers' deaths. But let me tell you something, okay? It's not 36. No. You've got upwards of 50, and I mentioned this on an earlier show. Interestingly enough, if you do have the opportunity to, we'll say, well, if J.P. Morgan Chase, for example, Bank of America, or Deutsche Bank, if they offer you a high-paying job at a very critical infrastructure position, you might want to rethink that offer. The list of top-level bankers dying under suspicious circumstances have been growing rapidly over the past several months. To me, what this tells me, and Joe, you and I talked about this. In fact, I'm glad this is the topic tonight. Again, for the first few minutes on Coast to Coast AM, going to have to set them straight in terms of the number. The latest, by the way, is a 52-year-old Belgian, Geert Tack, a private banker for ING. He managed the portfolios for the upper crust, shall we say. Described as impeccable and sporty and well cared for, successful. He went disappearing about a month ago, and his body was found off the coast of Ostend. Well, it's just his disappearance and the finding of his body. It's just riddled with questions. His body was found on December 3rd. This guy, obviously he underwent an autopsy, but no apparent trauma to the body. The results of toxicology tests right now are being done, and they're pending. But see, what makes this particular disappearance extra curious, shall we say, are the circumstances, very mysterious, under which he disappeared. You see, this guy, Tack, as we'll call him, he had a few weeks earlier, well, you know what, I'm not even going to get into that. Let me just say this. The circumstances under which all of these bankers are dying, falling dead, suicide by nail gun, really? Joe, buying that? Suicide by nail gun?
After the first shot, I would, if it was me committing suicide with a nail gun, and I shot myself once with a nail gun in the head, I could see a continuation of doing that, to kill yourself because of how much the first one hurt. Maybe 2 times, 3 times.
Well, you know, I got to tell you, Joe.
No. There's much simpler, much more painless ways that if you want to kill yourself, people who try to kill themselves do so because they want to escape the pain of this earth, whether it's mental pain, physical pain. They don't want more pain.
Exactly. Now, one of the things, and I will say this, I've seen some really curious circumstances. I mean, when I was a first responder, again, before they called them that, in the mid to late 70s, early 80s, I had the opportunity of responding to a call where a man shot himself in the head. Now, this man had Parkinson's, and there were 3 shots that were fired. One was in the ceiling, the other grazed his temple area, and the third was dead on into the head. Okay, now my partner and I arrived before the police went down, found the body, but also noticed he used a revolver to kill himself. But there were 3 shots, and the question was, why 3 shots? Why not 1? I mean, in what order? Obviously, we weren't there, but looking back and remembering like it was yesterday, the scene, talking with the coroner later. This man had Parkinson's. He was shaky. The first one, he just fired into the ceiling, period. The second one, he attempted to shoot himself in the head, and because he was shaking so badly, he only grazed himself. And then right after that, in very rapid succession, following the second shot, the third shot did the trick. So, so we recognize the fact that there are certain things that do happen. But when you're talking about death by nail gun, and then you're talking about the multitude of bankers, not 12, 24, or even 36, not even 48, as hangthebankers.com, good site, but not quite accurate, but a growing number, well over 50, and that's just increasing. And didn't Steve Quayle come on our show, and V come on our show and say this was going to happen, they were going to increase, and whoa, did they ever? This is back in April, I believe it was, when the list began to rise. So, folks, we are looking at, and I believe this wholeheartedly. And I was talking with Steve over the weekend, and we were talking about the prices of metals and silver and gold and all sorts of financial things. I do believe at the end of the day that the entire system, the global system, is going to collapse or be collapsed. I think that is the end game objective, is to collapse the global economic system. They've got to do it. They've got to put us under a one world currency. They've got to do that. They've got to destroy the middle class in order to do that. And they've got to cause racial strife. And as Joe, as you had said, ethnos versus ethnos, I mean ethnos in the Bible, they've got to cause racial strife in order to fertilize or make the ground fertile for the future events. I mean, they are really tilling the soil here in America to destroy our country, and to best destroy it is to wipe out the middle class. And, oh, by the way, Joe, did you see this? And folks, I don't know whether you saw this or not, this symbolic bill that was given to, the symbolic bill passed to essentially condemn the illegal amnesty or the prosecutorial discretion. Now, Jerome Corsi had said that there was no executive order that was passed. It was a directive to Jay Johnson. Did you happen to see that by chance? That the executive order for
No, yeah, okay. Here, something I learned about the executive orders, how they work. Now, one of the first executive orders that the president ever issued was one that I've referenced a lot. It was starting a bioethics commission on biological research, and going through these executive orders on the White House website, I couldn't find it in, I think, last year or this year, and that's where I got the initial one was from the White House website. Well, what they've done is presidential actions or memorandums are all considered part of the same thing, but some of the executive orders aren't listed on the White House.
Wait, wait a second. The White House. How does that happen? How does that happen? In other words, is it arbitrary?
Well, see, this one is odd because it wasn't something that they were trying to hide, so it doesn't make sense that they would keep it from the White House website. I have not went on the GAO on their website, the Government Accountability Office. I believe that's the other area or agency of the government that keeps track of every executive order. But I did see an article on Drudge earlier this week, and that brought the question up: was there an executive order? And I'm going to bring up the GAO. Let me see if it's on here right now.
Well, Jerome Corsi from WorldNet Daily is the one that said, "Hey, there is no executive order," and I'm sure he looked at the, and we've interviewed Dr. Corsi before, very, very well informed man. But I have when you look at the, we'll think about the, think about this like a criminal would think. For example, if you can paw it off, if you don't have to get your hands dirty by issuing an executive order, just a directive with respect to prosecutorial discretion to the head of one of your agencies, you're 2 or 3 steps removed from this whole issue. Now, that doesn't mean you didn't give the order. You gave the order to one of your subordinates. Your subordinates is, in fact, exercising the prosecutorial discretion, meaning that the Border Patrol is going to back off. So, my question is, going to what you stated, was this signed, an executive order that was signed and just not posted, or was this something a little bit more of a magic trick where no one really said the words executive order? We're just going to handle it this way. And was it done to keep Obama out of the firing path of potential impeachment proceedings, which, by the way, folks, I know, I don't agree. Impeachment, really? How do you impeach somebody who has usurped or taken over illegally, having no constitutional eligibility? How do you impeach someone like that? You can't. So anyway, there's something wrong with this picture. Just as much as I believe over the weekend, Joe, and I know that we did not talk about this today, but did you see where Obama was taken into the hospital, the motorcade, by the way, for his throat, the sore throat, and then they did a CAT scan?
That's what was told. And a question was posed to me by a friend, Larry, in Buffalo, who said, what do they need to do with the president health-wise that can't be done by bringing someone in the White House to do it? Why would he need to go to the hospital? I thought that was a good question.
That's a good question, especially when the White House physician, and I just learned this and was able to confirm this through one of my sources, that actually worked, well, I'll just say a friend of mine, now retired from the Secret Service, actually worked the presidential detail for a period of time, the PPD, the Presidential Protective Detail, who is in contact with someone on the same detail now. And without getting into stories and all that, just the fact that he confirmed to me that the White House physician is always within like 10, 12 feet at most from Obama, that it would, under his watch for the particular president that he covered, that was not the case. There was always a physician readily accessible. I mean, I'm talking within, a minute or two. But now you've got somebody that's following Obama in his shadow, literally. And there's something not right about that. But you're right. Going to Larry's question or statement about you've got an entire staffed hospital essentially at the White House as you do at the Capitol. So why? Yeah. Why?
Well, people like there's one person out here who says the president was poisoned, and not a credible source, but one theory. Could be true, could be false. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question.
But isn't it telling, if not sad, but definitely telling that you've got to, we as citizens of this once great country, and I do believe in its greatness still, but inherently, but isn't it sad that we cannot believe anything that comes out of the mouths of the people inside the Beltway, or even those reporting on it? That we have to come to speculate, to question, to ask questions. It's not right. I mean, it really is not right. We should be told what's going on, and the fact too that Obama has hidden his medical records. And I believe, I don't know this to be true, but I'm sure someone can correct me, but didn't Bush also hide his medical records or keep them from the public purview? I don't know, but
and just real quick here on the immigration, under the presidential memorandum on the 21st of November, it's the presidential memorandum modernization and streamlining the U.S. immigration visa system for the 21st century was announced. Now, the presidential memorandums are for heads of executive departments and agencies.
Right. So they're directing the people like Jay Johnson to do something. Is that what you're saying? So in other words, the memorandum will activate that person or instruct that person.
Through the executive order process, they have changed how they are able to make law. Now, we know how many changes have they made to the Obamacare law since it was passed? Like 20, 40,000, some odd amount. Usually you'd have to go put the bill again in front of Congress. They'd vote on it after changes were made, and it would have to be signed into law.
Remember the cartoon that you used to watch in school, how a law is made, and there was an animation?
Yeah.
Okay, well, apparently that
it was the Constitution that used to explain it. Now they've changed the regulatory flexibility through regulatory flexibility executive order and paved the way for what they call a regulatory pathway for agencies to make new law. And this is not by voting. This is not by publicly announcing what they're doing. This is by making entries into the Federal Register from department head of each agency of the federal government, whether it's the Department of Justice, whatever agency. They can write something up, put it in the Federal Register, and it can become law. This goes back to federalism and an executive order. I think it's 13132. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. It's federalism.
I got to tell you, folks, Joe, let me break in here and just tell the listeners what a great job you're doing on research with respect to the executive orders. He's got a drawer of a file cabinet filled with documents, hard copy, printed out documents with respect to what he's talking about, the various mandates, the legislating by, or the enacting of laws through fiat, I suppose, is a good way to put it. By the way, since I've already interrupted you, let me go back to something.
Getting reports of no sound in BTR.
Oh, isn't that just marvelous? Okay, well.
That's from some people. I don't know. Is anybody hearing us in the interactive chat who's listening through BTR?
Testing 1, 2. All right.
Rusty, he says he hears us.
All right. Thank you.
So at least one out there listening, so we'll keep going.
Sometimes.
You're called in.
Okay, I've got to say this, okay, folks, please. We've done so much with respect to asking BTR to change back their player, okay. You just have no idea the pains that it has caused us. And we get your emails, we understand them, we forward them to BTR. In fact, I just say that understand we're working hard to get the sound problems fixed.
If you go to our website, hagmanandhagman.com, right at the top, press the Hagmann and Hagmann button. Underneath it, it's a drop-down menu, how to listen. Scroll down to Cuban, open up Cuban, go to live, and you can listen that way. Or you can call in and listen if you
Or you can stand on your head and put the tin can up to your ear. I don't know. I did talk with Steve Quayle today, and hopefully we're going to change a few things with respect to the archive programs. If you go to the show archive page right now, you'll see it's kind of frozen in time. We're going to fix that here tonight, but we're also talking about doing something different in terms of changing down the file size, making the archives more readily available, and that essentially what we're going to attempt to do. And I've got to find out about this. And Joe, we had a meeting today, but this was not brought up. I'm going to check to see if we can't have our own server with our own files on the server, and that would just cost us. I mean, it would cost us more money, but at least we have control over the audio quality and output of the show archives. Okay. Anyway, I want to just touch on something earlier. I said earlier we referenced the dead banker in Colorado, the nail gun guy. We'll just call him the nail gun guy. Okay. One of our listeners, good friend as well to the program, Ken, thanks so much for your information, who lives in very, very close proximity to the nail gun guy, okay, said that, the police responded to the alleged suicide by nail gun, and he knows people. He knows the police in that area, very close. Good source, good solid source. Said that the cops said no way. As far as the suicide, then of course the black suits, the men in black suits came in, took over the investigation, and suddenly it was a suicide. Ken, thanks for that information, and thank you for confirming what we knew. But it's interesting because it's right there in front of us. And thanks, buddy. All right.
I just turned on Blog Talk, our show, on a different computer and put a headphone in, and I can hear the audio. So it is live, and I'll type refresh here in the chat.
But see, people shouldn't have to do that, you know?
Well, I don't understand. You know, if I turn it on and get audio right away, unless something just changed since you guys started mentioning you didn't have sound versus when I turned on the computer or on the show. But there's a lot of different problems that get emailed to us about a lot of different listening errors or problems with trying to get the show.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're frustrated beyond. I mean, to outer space. Understand that we're frustrated to outer space, folks. One thing I didn't mention this earlier in the commercial break, but let me just do this now, because this is a lady that I've come to know in terms of her and her husband, just hardworking individuals. And I just want to say this: if you would like to give the gift of toffee, English toffee. This is some of the greatest candy toffee I've ever had in my life. It's chocolate. Folks, go to honesttogoodnesstoffee.com, honesttogoodnesstoffee.com. This is a very small operation, but it's one of the cleanest, one of the best, and it's all licensed, fully inspected, all of this. But the toffee is made in small batches. It's almost, well, it is handmade, but it's almost homemade. It works this would be a great gift to give and to receive for the holidays. It's honest to goodness toffee. I want to mention that because Jeannie, who is the CEO of honesttogoodnesstoffee.com and also the head cook there, she chops the nuts to making the toffee, to doing and shipping and receiving, does everything there. They're solid Christian people. They're good people, and it's a startup company. And I just love the spirit of being a business owner, and especially one that's solidly rooted in Christianity. And boy, instead of going all commercial, you can certainly not only receive but send a quality product, both quality in taste but also in presentation, and I like that. I just want to throw that out there as well. I know it kind of is a cumbersome time to do it, out of place, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that before we close the show. That's honesttogoodnesstoffee.com. Great people, great product, and especially around this time of year, let's keep her busy. Getting back to the news, everything that seems like we've taken a vacation from the news for a while because of the guest schedule that we had. By the way, how'd you like, folks? How'd you like the Bob Fletcher interview from Friday with Steve Quayle? We got a lot of great emails about that, and we're gonna have Bob Fletcher back on too. But kind of a rhetorical question. If you haven't listened to Bob Fletcher and Steve Quayle, please do so. Talking about Planet X, and he's really knowledgeable. The Sonny Bono death and the bankers that we're talking about right now. got to tell you, pretty compelling stuff that Bob Fletcher has done with respect to the, I'll say, murder of Sonny Bono. And people might think, well, that's ridiculous. Look at the evidence. Look at the research he's done. But there, I'll shut up. Go ahead, Joe.
This article from 9 hours ago out of the Associated Press, Russia on Monday demanded an explanation for the Israeli airstrike on 2 areas near Damascus, while the Syrian and Iranian foreign ministers called it an act of aggression that proves Israel is in the same trench with the extremist groups fighting the Syrian government. Israeli warplanes struck near Damascus International Airport on Sunday, as well as outside of a town close to the Lebanese border. The attacks are unlikely to have a big impact. Israel has already struck inside Syria on several occasions.
Using a nuke, I believe, on one. I'm sorry to interrupt, but but you know what? I believe that one of the strikes, at least I think it was in 2013, a small, low-yield nuclear device, the likes of which we don't even know exist, was used by Israel in Syria, I believe it was, against the Syria munitions, or Russian munitions depot in Syria. And that this comes from various intelligence insiders saying, look, this was, Israel used a nuke. And by the way, when we talk about Israel, yes, of course, we know we back Israel. However, in this case, they're right along, their hands are just as dirty as our CIA with respect to ISIS and the formation thereof and their creation. Joe, did I do all right on that? I mean,
no, absolutely. The governments of this world are all controlled by forces that I think are beyond their control. But when we look at the citizens of every country and any country, I think we're all in the same boat. We are cattle. We are useless eaters, disposable tools needed when necessity calls, trash when thrown away when no longer needed. And the governments facilitate this, and whatever powers or shadow government groups make the orders or agendas or when and how, I'm not sure, but all the governments are guilty of collusion and treason against their own people. And I say that, I'd say for the most part, because there might be a few countries out there that you never hear about in the news, smaller ones, whatever. But the main countries, all involved in this big build-up to World War III that we've been watching, are all involved in some way or another of working with the enemy, their enemy, in ways that hurt their own people. And I'm not saying this is one of them with this airstrike in Damascus, but we are continuing to see the destabilization of the region, the Middle East, near Israel. We see the rhetoric coming out of Russia and Iran. We see the war games. I don't know if people saw the article or the news about how Russia has increased airplane or fighter jets in our airspace or over the Baltic Sea this weekend. I think they said about 12 different fighter jets were flying real close to the border and in and out of the airspace of the United States, and they were ramping up those activities, Putin said, or one of the head Russian leaders of the military said. And we see history. We have the ability to see history from the people who have written it, but also there are ways to verify things. Certain things are, known and unknown. Whether how the wars were started and why might not all be public, but we know that these people have been working an agenda. Well, no matter the leaders, no matter the timing, since the Federal Reserve started, since America was founded, they called this the New World. This was the New World after America became a nation and established itself. And after we tore each other apart in the Civil War, we were taken over by the banking powers, or we surrendered to the banking powers, And we are seeing the ends of what Cain started, the building of city-states and building of, as we said at the end of the last hour, one world governments established against the most holy God.
Doesn't this kind of dovetail with your research? You mentioned Cain, and I think this is the fourth or fifth time today I've heard you mention Cain and the lineage, and we discussed briefly, of course, Steve Quayle's book, Xenogenesis. If you haven't gotten that book, that's an eye-opener. What a great book, but I had the opportunity to write the first chapter of Steve Quayle's book, and actually it's when I say I wrote that, that information was basically dictated to me by our intelligence insider. But having said that, you're talking about the lineage of Cain. Isn't it interesting that we're at this point where in one day you've mentioned Cain half a dozen times, we'll say, and to me that means something.
Yeah. Well, the reason I mean that is, or I've been saying that, is because we all think of Nimrod, or at least I used to, as being one of the first people to establish cities and be hunters of men's souls. But Cain is attributed to, at least in Freemasonry and their own teachings about themselves and their history, it refers to him as building these cities and memories to themselves. So when we see what has happened, and we're told as it was in the beginning, so too shall it be in the end, only worse. When we see these huge empires being built, a new land, America, flourishing, becoming so powerful and rich that it encompassed more than half the world's wealth, with under a tenth of the population or less. We saw it flourish, and it did many great things. In the same time, there was subtle evil being implemented throughout that process.
Well, and again, I think, just as L.A. Marzulli talked about tonight with his Nephilim books on the Trail of Nephilim, as well as the Watcher series. If you go to Steve Quayle's books, Genesis 6 Giants, if you follow Timothy Alberino's work, the Alberino analysis, now all of these, folks, we've got linked off of HagmannandHagmann.com. One click, hit the banner, one click, bang, you're there. To me, and I was wrestling with this issue earlier. I was never one to believe that the Bible really had any. I want to be careful how I say this so I don't sound like a total heathen. I was a total heathen. When I looked at the Bible as growing up and when I was in seminary and afterwards, I look at the Bible as being a book that had significance, religious faith, and historical significance. But I didn't look at it as like a living work, something that, and I realize that it's prophecy in there as well. But I didn't really look at it as having relevance to day-to-day governmental type news information. But you enter Steve Quayle and Timothy Alberino, L.A. Marzulli, and others, Russ Dizdar, Paul McGuire, for crying out loud. We could name them all. And suddenly, the Bible, as an investigator, to me, the Bible now becomes front and center as a book is an indispensable resource for what happened and what is yet to come, and then what is happening, of course, right now. So when I don't know why I mentioned that, except to say that I was once of the opinion that news was news and Bible prophecy was Bible prophecy, and they were separate. But not anymore. No, they're so interrelated. And even to what, and it doesn't matter if we disagree on we'll say the significance of blood moons, just pulling something out, out of thin air, or the significance of I don't know. It doesn't matter. But just to, like L.A. said, just to bring this into the discussion today, I think is extremely important. That's just my view.
Yes, it is. And, we are, as I talked to many people over the weekend, we are seeing and all in agreement that the things we're seeing happening around us, the people of the Lord, certain people changing the focus of their ministries, changing their purpose or their, as one person pointed out, this is a good example. Augusto says he's told by the Lord to stop giving warnings and to start preparing. Rick Wiles was told that he needs to stop focusing on news and start covering Scripture. People are seeing and getting information from the Lord in their walk, both in the who do this publicly and who do this privately, are getting a word from the Lord, a warning from the Lord, a message that is not frightening, as some people will say. This is fear-mongering. But the walls are closing in around us. The Lord told us, we won't know the day or the hour. Don't try to figure out and calculate the timing of His return, but know the seasons.
That's right.
Know if you're in summer, fall, winter, or spring. Know if you're in the end times or if you're not. And it's so simple. If you read the Bible and then you read the accounts of Genesis and you read the New Testament, the Gospels of Jesus, His coming here down to earth in the flesh, dying as prophesied by all the books in the Old Testament and all the prophets of the Old Testament, being resurrected again. So He gave His gift. He gave His life for the gift of salvation so all can be saved. And unfortunately, when the churches have conformed to what the world's standards are instead of what God's standards are, that's the biggest red flag for me. And that's already happened, and it's continuing further and further. And people are being separated into groups. You have those that are on fire for the Lord, and their dedication is in love and understanding is increasing. Those that are against Him, their hatred is becoming more apparent in the rhetoric and in the things we see against Him publicly. And then those that are indifferent are sinking further into their nothingness. And
that's a good point about indifference. As we have only 2 minutes left of the show. Well, thank you. In my ear, 90 seconds. As we look at, and I'll close with this, as we look at the people today, clearly we're seeing a generation, and I mean a generation, of zombies, zombified people, if you will, that really they are dumbed down intellectually. And I'm not going to make any apologies for using that phrase. They are almost immune to emotional upset. It amazes me to see a generation of people. Somebody sent me an email over the weekend, and I'll just wrap it up by saying this, of a C-SPAN video that I did watch. It was I don't have the gentleman's name in front of me, but he wrote a book, and essentially what he said was things are going to have to get so bad right now, like an total economic collapse, or another 9/11 to wake people up from their stupor. And unfortunately, I agree. So that's where I'm at. All right. Hey, tonight, if you're up for it, I'll be a guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie for the first couple of minutes of the program. Yeah, first couple of minutes. And then tomorrow, Stan Deo, of course, but also Thursday, Joe and I, Pastor Paul Begley's show. Thanks, Heidi. And until then, until tomorrow, God bless and stay safe. All right.